A quiet night at the office. No phone calls, no messages, nothing but junk mail and overdue bills to keep me company. Seems nobody wants to hire a real private dick anymore, a professional like me. A guy who does the detective work nobody else wants to do. A guy who wears hats and walks around in a black and white world. I began contemplating a more profitable line of work, like politics.
We are the show you want to know. It's time to talk to you.
All right, folks. Good morning, and welcome to the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show right here at AM 830 WCRN. I'm Joe Mangiacotti, and over the next 3 hours, we're here till noon. You can join the conversation at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. And of course, you can text us as well because our text line is up and running. And you can do that. Just text like you would anybody else at 617-297-8388. 617-297-8388. It does appear on a screen here in the studio in real time. We try to work it into the conversation. Another way for you to participate in the show. Now, if you do dial 508-871-7000, he'll get you to headquarters, and Russ is behind the glass flying the board back at HQ, and he'll get you set up and into the studio for two-way talk and conversation. Hey, don't forget that we do stream to the TuneIn app, like thousands of other radio stations do. We stream to the TuneIn app 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. So it's a great feature. I love this feature because it's very easy to listen to the station. Even if you're running around, getting in and out of the car, it will jump from your device to your Bluetooth in the car. It's a great way to do it. Or tell Alexa to play WCR, and she'll do that. No questions asked. Now, the show does also, or I do stream the show, I should say, to the station's Facebook page and YouTube channel. But you can also follow me on my social media platforms at Joe Mangi Show, M-A-N-G-I, Joe Mangi Show. And I do stream, so the Cameo Cam is on as I'm broadcasting from the Cameo studio. So that means you can watch it on Twitch TV, LinkedIn profile, X, Facebook, and Rumble, the TJM Show channel on Rumble. So you got all kinds of ways to listen and join us this morning. And I see that the streamers are starting to click up. So good morning and welcome to the Sunday show. Don't forget the show is always turned into a podcast and then posted. And you can subscribe or you get your podcast there, like iHeartRadio, Tuned In, Spotify, etc. We got a lot to talk about today, a lot coming up. You know, we've got, of course, Flag Day coming, which happens to be Trump's birthday as well. But also joining us, well, as he does every week, of course, at 9:30, Jerry Doherty, right, president and founder of Boston Independence Group. You know him from Making Money Last and in his several books on financing or retirement, I should say, will join us at 9:30 as he does every Sunday this week. And don't forget that the 11 o'clock hour is brought to you by, of course, Heart to Home Meals. And we'll hear more about them later. Also coming up in the 11 o'clock hour today, and I'm excited about this because joining us is Scott Wolter. Now, he's a professional geologist, petrographer, author, president of the American Petrographic Services out of Minnesota. And you all remember Tom Hanks as Robert Langdon. Remember him, Professor Langdon from Harvard in the Vinci Code. Harvard for professor symbology and religious iconology. And he follows clues and reads symbols and decodes the hidden messages and challenges. That's the official story there, right? Well, Scott may be the closest thing we have to the real life version of that character, except Scott doesn't just work from dusty manuscripts in museum walls. He works from stone, inscriptions, geology, forensic evidence, artifacts that may tell a story in history. Some of them tried very hard to ignore. So many know Scott also from America Unearthed, where he investigated some of the most controversial and fascinating questions in American history. The Kensington Rune Stone, the Hooked X, Oak Island, the Knights Templar, Freemasonry, and the possibility that Europeans may have reached North America long before Christopher Columbus. Of course, the Vikings did, the Templar Knights did, but we'll talk to Scott. His work ask a very provocative question. What if the symbols, stones, and buried clues that have been telling us the truth all along in the official version of history is the real mystery? So Scott Wolter, he'll join us in the 11 o'clock hour this morning. All right, 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. Like I said, we got a lot to talk about. Washington, right? The whole D.C. cleanup thing going on. The Lincoln Memorial, the reflecting pool there, that has gotten so much controversy. And I love, again, it seems the Democrats always get some kind of memo for buzzwords or talking points to use. And the ones we're hearing, a vanity project. And of course, we hear many of them blatantly mislead or try to mislead you, but you're smarter than that. When they talk about the ballroom and taxpayer money, where, of course, we know that $200 million is coming from private donations, including Trump's money and donors' money. It has nothing to do with taxpayer money. And yes, there is some taxpayer money involved. It's not so much for the ballroom, guys. The ballroom's paid for with private funds. Remember, and I think this is something that Trump might have slipped up, more or less, right? I think he gets excited when he's talking about things, and sometimes he may cross the line as to maybe you shouldn't have shared that versus what you can share. But he talked about the fact that they're upgrading the bunker and the military defenses and so forth at the White House, and where in the East, what was the East Wing, and where the ballroom will be, goes 6 stories down. And that has to do with Secret Service and protection of the White House, fortifying the White House, and the military. So there'll be an upgrade to the Situation Room in the capabilities that can be done from the White House, and getting in line with more modern technology, because drones are a big part of warfare now, as we're watching in the Iran conflict, right? So now, not only will the White House, upon completion, be able to handle drone attacks with EMP weapons and netting and things of that nature, but it will also be able to launch drones to counteract from the White House. So we're going 6 stories down where the ballroom will be, where the East Wing will be. And the rest of this, right, that they're trying to play it down like it's, God forbid, you should actually clean up D.C. How dare you? The Trump derangement syndrome is so palpable here, so ridiculously set in these people. They really can't. You say, oh, look what we've done to the reflecting pool, which has a history of, and the last time I was there was a little while ago. As you know, I was there and I haven't always gone to the pool, but the last time I was in DC and we went over to that area, and I brought my friend with me who, actually my fiance with me, who has never been to DC before. So we did the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, the pool, the Vietnam Memorial, the Korean, you know how you do it, right? And it looked horrible. There was no water in it. And it was sludge and sand and like a bicycle in the middle of it. And it was really a poor representation, very embarrassing for the Capitol. And so when you say, well, let's clean this up, it's America's front porch, and you have a problem with that, I don't get that. I don't get that at all. So Washington is getting a very visible cleanup ahead of our 250th birthday. And the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool has become a symbol of it. The pool has been drained and scrubbed, repaired, refilled after work that included cleaning out algae and sediment and trash, and of course the famous or infamous goose mess. Now, the National Park Service has described regular cleanup as necessary, right? Because the pool holds, and believe this or not, Ma, 7 million gallons of water. 7 million gallons. And it's exposed to heavy public use. Also the wildlife, and of course debris. But this is more than maintenance story, guys, right? It's a quality of life story. It's a national pride story. Washington, D.C. is the front porch of the United States. And if these monuments are dirty and the parks are neglected and the streets are unsafe and the Capitol looks run down, what is the message? What does that send to the country, to the world? We clean our homes before guests arrive, right? Why wouldn't we want America cleaned up and its capital, especially here before the 250th anniversary of independence? This is civic pride, political branding, or overdue basic stewardship. What is it? It's pride as far as I'm concerned. And all the criticism that gets thrown about vanity projects. No, the real question is, why did you sit quietly when these monuments and statues were defaced and covered in graffiti? And as far as this reflecting pool goes, this thing has been leaking for decades. It has been a problem. And we've all read the stories. What were the government estimate contracts floating around desks in DC? Companies were quoting in the $200 million range to fix the reflecting pool. Talk about scams and graft and kickbacks. This is going to end up costing about $2 million. Because Trump, who, hey, is a developer, right? I mean, he became a multi-billionaire from developing properties. So you know he has a guy for everything, right? He's your really typical New Yorker. I got a guy for that. Oh, I got a guy for that. Well, of course he has a guy for when it comes to pools, reflecting or otherwise. He has resorts and golf clubs and hotels and all over the world. So of course he has pool people. And he calls the pool people and he says, I need you to go take a look at this. And they come back and they say, you know, it's going to be a couple $100,000 to clean it up, and we'll seal it and fix it. We'll paint it and fill it. What's the total price? A couple $1 million for 7 million gallon pool, basically, in essence. And then there was the whole issue. Oh, okay, what's the color? And originally Trump had said to him, I like that turquoise, like in the Bahamas and stuff. And they came back and said, that doesn't really work for DC. We're not in the Bahamas. It would look out of place and strange. You need a shade of blue that's more apropos to, the Northeast, or at least this part of the country. And as he was going through the colors, the names of the colors of blue, he gets to American flag blue. And that's all Trump had to hear, right? That's it. American flag blue. We got it. So I am so glad DC is looking the way it's looking now. Plus, it's safe. Compared to a few years ago and under the Biden administration. And of course, we're also dealing with shifting gears here, right? The election, California vote counting still happening. This has absolutely eroded the trust in elections, right? You got Steve Hilton, who just was leading and fell to second place by a couple of points. And I got to tell you something. When it takes you this amount of time, it just say, this doesn't sound right. All of a sudden you get, they stop counting, middle of the night, they get these vote dumps, and all of a sudden the Democrat seems to always pull away. It doesn't seem to ever work for the conservative or the Republican. So California's slow ballot count is again becoming national election integrity flashpoint. In the governor's race, Steve Hilton, right? And you got Bacara, Xavier. They were leading in this open primary thing they do. Tom Steyer, he was in the third. And then he was within range, right? Now these mail-in ballots continue to be continued. And Gavin Newsom changed it so that they send, and this is the stupidest thing when it comes to election, to blindly send millions of ballots out there. What you're doing is you're just sending these things out into the world, begging them to be abused. We've got to stop that. There has to be some kind of national law preventing this. I know the Constitution says states determine the election, but there should be able to be a law that says you cannot blindly mail ballots out. You're inviting fraud. You just are. So now we have Hilton. Well, he was at 27.8, but Bakara just pulled ahead by, 3-4 points. Someone can tell me that. And you still have 19.6% outstanding of the ballots outstanding. So when they do this jungle primary, as they call it there, you've got Hilton and Bakara in the top 2 spots, the 2 highest vote getters, advance regardless of the party, which is why sometimes the 2 people running off in the general election could actually be of the same party. In California, they often 2 Democrats. So you got to separate the legal process here from the public perception. California says the delay comes from those mail-in ballots and then the signature verification and the time allowed for voters to cure errors. That's the other thing they do. If they get a ballot, what that means, curing, right? They get a ballot and maybe it's unclear as to who they voted for on that, or you can't really see the name, or if there's anything wrong with it. Instead of just tossing it, not counting it, they cure it. They either make an effort to get a hold of the person, say, what did you mean? Or the person there in the clerk's office or the election commission, they decide what the intention must have been. Let that one sink in. So the issue is not just whether fraud can be proven. The issue is whether the system is built in a way that ordinary citizens can actually trust it. If it takes days or weeks to know who won, don't be shocked when people start asking these questions. It's really that simple, folks. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. Let's jump to the phones. Gary in North Attleboro. Hey, Gary, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Listen, first of all, I got 3 quick things. One is the first subject you were discussing, which was the idea that Trump is finally doing things in Washington that needed to be done, and he's managing to not only get them done, but get them done, under budget. Mm-hmm. You have the criticism was, oh, this ballroom, oh my goodness, the gold leaf, there's gold leaf all over the place. If anybody's ever actually been into any federal building, there is a lot of gold leaf in those buildings. There's also
marble work, right? You look at some of the marble work and the woodwork, that these buildings that were built in the 30s, 20s, 30s, and 40s, gorgeous. I mean, skilled labor, I don't even think we could find today. And I think they should look like this. They're representing the country. They should be solid, beautiful pieces of work, pieces of art. I think a lot of it is based on the European models of, the way that they built their, they're like the House of Commons, and over in France, the palace, whatever it is, where the president is. It's all it. Oh, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. That is the fashion. And if you were to go into a lot of even like Gilded Age houses, like down in Newport, you would see that what we see now, it just looks tacky to us. But that was the fashion. That was the way that it works. And in a lot of government buildings, that still stays the same. So, I mean, I am still under the impression that the moment a Democrat gets into the White House, the first thing they're going to do is tear that whole thing down, just to show, just to satisfy their more rabid constituents. You mean tear down the ballroom or tear off the gold? Yeah. Oh, yeah. I hope they don't. Doubt. I hope they don't. I hope somehow. You see, the thing is, right, here's the funny thing, or the irony is Trump found out, in like most of us who didn't realize, because of what our founding fathers did in setting up Washington, D.C. as not as a state, and putting the current, whoever the president is actually in charge. I mean, they didn't have a mayor or anything like that. I think it was in the early 73 or something that they passed a bill saying, what we call D.C. can actually have a mayor and a council but they're not but the president still runs DC. And because DC is this very unique island onto its own, he didn't need to go get construction or a demolition permit. He was able to just go do that. And that's flipping out the left. But whenever any other president ever wanted to do anything, and let's remember, after World War II in the 50s, the entire interior of the White House was gutted. They just kept the four walls that we see up as they rebuilt, because the thing was built in 1792. It was falling apart. It was wood. So they rebuilt it with metal, with steel beams and security upgrades and all this other stuff. So this is nothing. And if they tear the ballroom down out of political posturing, there's got to be a way to stop that and say you can't do that. And don't forget that the ballroom's sitting on top of 6 floors down of security defenses and situation rooms and military headquarters. Like, leave it alone. Let this get done. That White House has gone through tons of incarnations over 200 years. You know what I'm saying?
Yes. And it speaks more to TDS than it does to any actual, So the second thing is, you were discussing California. There was a YouTube video channel that I was watching yesterday, and it's called State of Daniel. This guy just reports on, he's a numbers guy, and he's basically just talking about numbers. And he was talking about one of these dumps that came in the middle of the night, that in Los Angeles, there was an increase of like 24,000 votes for the Democrat, 0 for the Republican, and it didn't affect any other race that was out there. Because if you're voting in Los Angeles County, you're not only voting for the mayor, but you're also voting for your. He said that nothing else moved except for the mayor, and it was, of course, how these mistakes always just seem to be one-sided. They're always in favor of the left. You never see this sort of thing, in favor of the right. But so he was talking about this, and I'm hoping that somebody is counting the numbers and looking at this whole thing and is prepared to cry foul at the end of it, like you said.
And you got to do it while it's happening, Gary, right? Because afterwards they put the spin on it. Election denier. I mean, it was okay for them always. Hillary Clinton to this day still calls Trump illegitimate president from 2016, for Christ's sakes. That's okay. But you got to do it on election day. You got to do it while it's happening, right? And my understanding from some of the articles that I saw, that the Republican parties they have lawyers and so forth at these things. But when you see what you just described, that is so ridiculous that you've got this in the middle of the night, a dump, and it only affects one race. Who the hell goes into a voting or takes a mail-in ballot and they only vote in one race out of 6 or 7?
Yep.
I argue no one does that unless you're there to only boost up the numbers for that one person, and the chances are you're probably not a real voter to begin with. Then this is
in
so
2020
bad.
we saw some of this. In 2020 we saw some of this. I forget which state it was in, but they basically these ballots came in. They would check Joe Biden for president, and Kamala Harris for vice president, but there was nothing else on there, including signatures. And they had to go and say, okay, yeah, we there's not even signatures. And of course, some liberal judge went, no, it's somebody's vote. It has to count. So again, I think that there has to be a system of being able to determine these things. One last really quick thing. Speaking of California, I saw this yesterday, thought it was hilarious. Gavin Newsom can't run for governor again. That's why there's a whole new race going on. They're term limits. So he's got a best-selling book out from the New York Times, best-selling book about his story, and it's his campaign, his people put out a statement that said this is from organic, non-bulk purchases, because it's an old game, by the way, for those of you who don't know, that someone will write a book and a politician, and it will be bought up by unions and PACs, and then they'll basically just landfill the thing because they're trying to create this artificial notion that that there's the excitement for this guy or this candidate. And as it turns out, his PAC bought They said he sold 91,000 copies. His pack picked up 67,000 copies, but said, no, it's not a bulk purchase because we're giving them away with everybody who donates to Gavin Newsom for president 2028.
Yeah, but they're still
and that
counting.
was how he tried to get around.
Yeah. 2/3 of the books sold were bought by one entity, meaning his pack. And sure, why not give them away? You paid for them. But yeah, it's the old inflated the numbers. And you're right, they do this all the time. And politician writes a book and the lobbyist organizations buy tens of thousands of copies to boost the numbers for them. It's another way of funneling the money to them.
Exactly. I've also thought that it was a good way that if you wanted to pay a candidate directly, you have them write a book.
The clock, Gary. Sorry about that, buddy. We got to go. Jerry Doherty up next, folks. Thank you, Gary. Back in a moment, folks.
If you enjoy listening to Full Service Radio AM 830 WCRN, don't forget you can stream WCRN on your computer or on your phone at WCRNradio.com and on your Amazon Alexa by saying, "Alexa, listen to WCRN." On the radio, in your car, on your computer or phone. We are Full Service Radio, AM 830 WCRN.
Looking for a station that brings you all sides of the story? Tune in to 50,000 watt powerhouse WCRN, where the left and the right meet in the middle. Whether you lean left, lean right, or just want to stay informed, WCRN has you covered with diverse voices, lively debates, and thought-provoking discussions. From politics and health to pop culture, you'll hear it all right here. Radio Central, where opinions from both sides come together for the conversations that matter. From the center of the dial, the center of New England, and the center of information, AM 830, WCRN, Radio Central.
Tune in each Saturday morning here on WCRN 8:30 a.m. for Garden Talk Radio. It's the Gardening with Joey and Holly radio show. Topic-focused, guests from across the country, and answering your garden questions. Send your questions in to gardentalkradio@gmail.com or call anytime to 1-800-927-SHOW. 1-800-927-SHOW. That's each Saturday morning here on WCRN 8:30 a.m. Catch the replay Sunday mornings from 5 to 6 a.m. Tell a friend and let's grow together.
Attention podcast enthusiasts. Are you tired of recording in cramped, poorly equipped rooms? Use WCRN Radio Studios. Our state-of-the-art facilities and experienced technicians will elevate your podcasts to new heights. With soundproofing, high-quality microphones, and advanced editing software, you'll sound like a pro in no time. Record in WCRN Radio Studios and bring your podcasts to life. Simply visit WCRNradio.com and click the podcast link. That's WCRNradio.com.
More live and local radio than anywhere on the dial. WCRN.
All right, folks, welcome back here to the second half of the first hour of the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show here on AM 830 WCRN. Reminding folks you can join the conversation for the time we have left together, the remainder of the time at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Our text line is up and running, and that's 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. And you can text that like you would anybody else. It appears here on the screen in real time, and we try to work it into the conversation. And of course, as every week, Jerry Doherty joins us. So if you can envision the life that you want to lead, he can help you develop a strategy to keep you on path to that goal at Boston Independence Group. You can take control of it. And of course, you know him from Making Money Last. So Jerry Doherty, welcome to the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show. And you look marvelous.
Joe, thank you very much. And good morning to you. Good morning to Russ. And of course, good morning to everyone listening this morning on this beautiful Sunday morning.
You're just changing up your backgrounds every week, huh? We're going to find a new look.
Well, Joe, I have a house full of grandchildren running around. So
you're getting moved.
So that's what the reality is. So
the reality of it is, there you go.
More interesting story, but that's the reality.
And happy birthday. You had some birthday parties with the grandkids this weekend, right?
I did. Actually, my grandson, Jack, just turned 4 years old. So we had a big party for him yesterday. Hence the house full of people here.
Awesome, Jeff. Well, Jerry Doherty, you know what? Let's get into this because the government gives us the headline numbers, and they get thrown out there in the middle of the newscast and so forth. But families that live in the real numbers, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what this economy actually feels like for people trying to retire, keep up with the bills, and protect what they've spent a lifetime building. Maybe start with the latest job numbers.
Yeah. So as you well know, Joe, we got a really good jobs report just last week. And that showed that the economy is creating a lot of jobs, and different than under the Biden administration, the jobs that are being created are actually in the private sector. These are private sector jobs, which is an indication of everything that Trump is doing that's correct about expanding the economy and giving business owners the sense that they can go out there and hire people. So the numbers were terrific. What was especially interesting in the numbers is the amount of manufacturing jobs that were created. And that number came in at about 7,000 manufacturing jobs. The overall number of jobs created was about 170,000. But out of those 7,000 manufacturing jobs, that's the policies that President Trump has put into place at work.
Yeah.
Right there. Again, we've seen since the Trump administration began, probably about a year and a half ago or so, we're seeing that the number of government jobs has been decreasing, but the number of private sector jobs has been increasing. That's a sign of a very healthy economy. Remember, under President Biden, we had a lot of job creation, but it was all primarily in government jobs, just the expansion of the government sector.
And then they were so
That's
proud.
not a healthy economy.
We added 30,000 jobs. From taxpayer funds, guys. That's not good news. Yeah, absolutely.
Right. And that's the only reason that the government can do anything is because they have taxing authority, Joe. That's what it is. These are jobs that Biden created because they have taxing authority. And that's what pushed pressure on governments to expand the amount of revenue that they're, getting from taxes because of all this job creation. Trump has a much different view of this. Let's expand the economy. Let's create a pro-growth environment. Let's have low tax rates. And by way of those low tax rates, we'll create more businesses that will pay taxes, and we'll create more taxpayers, but everybody's paying lower rates. It's a totally different view of how to run a government. This is why, I'm a big believer, Joe, I know you are too, in having a business person as the CEO of the largest corporation in the world, the United States of America.
Yeah. And, Trump is saying, look, the man bringing back, right? He has brought trillions in money on to our shores, or promises of this. And you've got companies outside of America coming to build plants here. And of course, the threat of those or the tariffs made a lot of people say, well, if we just manufacture it, I mean, we can go all the way back to when Ford was going to put the Mexican plant, and Trump said, fine, you can do that, but I'm going to slap a tariff on it. And what do? They stopped building the plant in Mexico and they kept it in the United States. And that's the type of thing. These are things that you're never going to see a Biden come up with. But let's talk a little bit about the unemployment, because the long-term unemployment are now about 2 million people. And more than a quarter of all the unemployed workers have actually been out of work for 27 weeks or longer. So what does that mean to people? What does that mean to us? Why is that an important thing?
Well, Joe, when you look at the unemployment rate, right now we have an unemployment rate of about 4.3%. That's where unemployment is running. Historically, by any standard, under 5% employment has been considered full employment. There are always going to be a number of people, who are looking for jobs or who are out of work for whatever it happens to be. Maybe they need retraining, whatever it is. I think that with the unemployment number right now, anybody, realistically speaking, this is a generalization, but realistically speaking, anybody who would like to have a job in this economy can get a job. We just had in 1 month 170,000 jobs created. Okay. And when you look at those unemployment, when you look at the job creation numbers too, tying in this whole unemployment conversation, when you look at that, they revise the numbers, don't forget, for the month of, April and for March. they revised those numbers upwards. Those numbers had more job creation than originally thought. These numbers are always revised. Under
Even
Biden,
that, Jerry, right?
Yeah.
Because under the Biden administration, they'd
Everything
come
was
out and
revised
brag,
down.
and the revision would always be down.
would be
you know?
down. Right. Here we have not only a home run, a grand slam. It was greater. Remember, it was predicted, it was expected that there were going to be 85,000 jobs created, right? 85,000 jobs created during the month of May. As it turned out, there were 170,000 jobs. So it's just about, double. It was actually a little bit more than double when you look at the exact numbers, a little bit more than double what was expected. And then the previous 2 months were revised upwards. That is just, it's an incredible thing. So yes, Joe, there are still people who are unemployed. There's no question about that. But 4.3% is still a pretty respectable number. And you have to remember, we're getting these numbers right now while this war is still going on. And while we still have a lot of issues, relative to oil and everything else. If the war were not going on, once we exit this war, I think we will see, number one, the inflation numbers come down that we haven't really touched on this morning. But then number two, I think we're going to see these unemployment numbers and the job creation numbers become even better. I think we're really kind of, positioned for rocket fuel once the war ends, once this whole situation gets straightened out.
Yeah. Well, to your point, right? So inflation, always a kitchen table issue here. April CPI was 3.8 year over year. But energy was up 17.9. Gasoline was up 28.4. But and Trump, again, common sense tells you, look, as soon as the Iran conflict settled and the Strait of Hormuz, and you've got, Krug Island is maxed out. You got tankers sitting there that can't go anywhere. You got empty tankers waiting to fill up. And not that really affects America, other than the fact that we have all kinds of tankers, steaming. That's an old-fashioned term. No ship steams anymore, but you know what I mean. They're headed to the United States to fill up because we're now becoming the gas station for the world. But when that gets I think, and I've watched guys like John C. and other people talk with Maria in the morning and different shows. Everybody's of the same mind, other than Trump, because nobody believes Trump, right? Oil is going to drop certainly down to 70, maybe 65, dollars a barrel. And what's that going to do? And the ripple effect of that. So on the inflation note, we're dealing with some high gas prices, but I watch these members of Congress in these hearings, and they pretend that the 4 years under Biden didn't exist, that the Green New Deal bill didn't exist. And the reason it was up there was because of policies. Right now, we know exactly why gas is costing us, and we know exactly what's going to happen when that gets rectified. Gas is going to drop. We're going to be down under $3, no question. I would say closer to $2 a gallon when all is said and done, and the ripple effect through the economy, right? Because everything's shipped by gasoline or diesel. Inflation, if you listen to the Democrats on the Hill, you would think we were living in the Biden years still, which they were totally deaf, dumb, and blind during those times, by the way.
Yeah. So with Joe Biden, I mean, you had people like Larry Summers, not exactly a conservative voice that's out there. You had people like Larry Summers, who in 2021, was writing articles saying that these Biden policies are going to create incredible inflation. And why would they? Why would he be writing things like that? He'd be writing things like that because coming out of COVID in 2020, supply chains, everybody knew this language, supply chains were closed, right? Entire ports were closed, right? We had no business activity going on. So there was no supply. There was no supply. Supply chains are a problem. And against that no supply, what the Biden administration did is they began to put in policies that were effectively giving money away to Americans. That's what they were doing. They had a lot of this fiscal stimulus. We all know that language as well, right? Essentially giving money away to people. When you give money away to people, what do they do with it? They spend it. What does that ultimately mean? That ultimately means that you're increasing demand. So what the Biden administration did is they increased demand against a very finite, in fact, a low supply. So if you have all of this demand for very few products, of course, it's going to drive the price up on products. This is basic economics. And that's why, it's economics 101. And this is why we had people like Larry Summers even saying that these are inflationary policies that are being put into place. Okay. So that's why the inflation happened under Biden.
Yeah.
What President Trump did is President Trump completely reversed all of those policies, and he wants to grow his way out of the economy. So when you think about it, if you have a growing economy, because a lot of economists think, and Trump I think has turned them on their head, that you can't have a growing economy without inflation. But Trump has said, why can't you have a growing economy without inflation? Why can't we have more and more people that are creating more and more supply, more taxpayers, more businesses and everything else? But why can't we have more and more supply meeting that demand? And we were seeing that until we got into the war situation. Remember, prior to the war, under Trump, just like under his first administration, we saw minimal, almost no inflation on a month-to-month basis. It was very, very minimal. Now, annualized, it was still up around 2.5% prior to the war, pre-war. We're still at 2.5%, somewhere around there. But now with the war, with oil prices going up and oil affecting everything, that's what's really caused the inflation. What's interesting, Joe, in those CPI numbers that you mentioned, and it's actually the PCE numbers that you're referring to, that 3.8% number, that personal consumption expenditure is the PCE, the Fed's preferred gauge. Their headline number in the PCE is indeed 3.8%. But when you look at the core number, stripping out energy and food, and the big one is energy, stripping out energy, from those numbers, it drops down to 3.3. So when you think about this, despite all of the things that are going on in the world right now that are negative, that should be inflationary, inflation has hung in there at a core level of 3.3%, even under the Fed's preferred gauge. And as you know, under Kevin Warsh, they're moving to a new inflation gauge as well. They think is going to be even more accurate of what's going on in the economy. And then against that backdrop, and then I'll be quiet, Joe. Against that backdrop,
that's good stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Against that backdrop, you still have real wages increasing, not by as much as they were before, but you still have people with more money to spend still outpacing inflation, even despite the war. That's why once we get this war behind us, I think we'll be fine. I really do.
Well, I think
I'm not trying to sound Pollyannish, but I really do believe that.
Like I said, it'll be beyond fine. We're gonna see
be
more of a
fine,
boom than we did in the first administration. But when you said that about getting the money out the door, it just I have flashbacks to remember I think it was Project Veritas was one of those where they had the USAID kid under in the investigation, and he said, and I'll never forget this. Oh yeah, we got to get the money out the door. It was like throwing gold bricks off the Titanic. And the imagery of that, the sinking ship of the Biden administration throwing gold bricks off. I mean, $20 billion down there to what's her face in Georgia, right? The one who thinks she was the governor, for
Stacey
charity.
Abrams.
Yeah, that was set up a year before with $200 to open up the checking account or whatever. And then the next year they get $20 billion in a federal grant.
It's crazy.
It's crazy. And one of the things I was going to have in my notes to talk about today, because Steve Hilton brought it up, and I've been saying this now for months, because ever since Nick Shirley started blowing stuff up, man, is before you talk to us about taxes or pay your fair share or raising taxes, let's get a handle on the corruption and the fraud and all of this, the Medicare fraud, whether it's the hospice, the child care, all of that, but Medicare and Medicaid fraud, it has been happening. It in so much, Jerry, I think it's like become, oh yeah, that it's in the lexicon. I mean, I made the point that, you watch the old shows, from like Sopranos in the 90s, and half of every scam they're doing there is a Medicaid fraud, right? They got some degenerate gambler who happens to run an HMO, and they say, oh, good, we'll run all these phony MRI tests and stuff. So Medicare and Medicaid fraud has become so commonplace, it's almost as it's an acceptable thing. And Hilton was saying, and I've been saying this, if you when you're seeing these now adding up to billions and billions of dollars in a state, just one state, and we got 50 states, and it's here in Massachusetts as well. If you start adding this up, you're going to realize we might actually have a balanced budget, because if we didn't have to be collecting that level of taxes for the fraudsters and the scamming going on, we have plenty of revenue. I've always said our problem is not a revenue issue. We have the biggest revenue of any government in the planet. It's how we spend the money or how we allow the money to be scammed out of us.
Well, and Joe, that's the distinction that you're making right there. Because I think the fraud is an important part of this, and the Medicaid fraud in California, Medicare and Medicaid fraud, but especially Medicaid fraud in California, is really almost a unique situation because of the way that California runs some of these programs, and that's why Steve Hilton is laser focused on this thing, as he should be. But the fraud alone, all the Doge stuff that we saw from Elon Musk, that alone is not going to solve all these problems. No. To your second point, to your last point that you made, Joe, it really is just a spending problem. We need to stop spending at the federal level as much money as we have been spending. Remember, in 2019, the federal budget was just about $5 trillion, a little bit more than $5 trillion. And then COVID hit, and we did a lot of spending to get out of COVID, and we weren't sure what was going on. And I was certainly supportive of some of this stimulus spending to keep businesses alive and all this stuff like that. But there was a lot of fraud in there. There was a lot of poor judgment in there. And in that time, from 2019 up to 2025, the federal budget of the United States increased by 50%. We went from roughly $5 trillion to $7.5 trillion in a 5-year period of time. Now, at the same time, the population of the United States increased by roughly 3%, between 3 and 4%. The population of the United States increased by during that period of time. So you think about that, we had a population increase of 3 or 4%, but federal spending increased by 50%. And then some of these temporary COVID programs, remained in place as permanent programs. What is kind of a bright light, though, Joe, is that when you look at it, right now we have federal revenues that are around $5 trillion. That's where federal revenues are because of the 2017 tax cuts, Trump tax cuts, primarily the jobs cuts and the job creation and whatever it was called in 2017, Tax Cuts and Job Creation Act of 2017. When we look at that, federal revenues today are $5 trillion. So if we could roll the budget back to where it was in 2019, which I know is impossible. Nobody's going to do this. But if we could, we'd actually have a balanced budget right now. Revenues would pretty much equal federal spending.
Yeah.
So,
and it wouldn't be raiding the Social Security Trust Fund either. 508-871-7000.
In there.
Exactly. Let's take a quick call. Mark from Worcester's waiting patiently. Hey, Mark, you're on with Jerry Doherty and myself.
Everybody relax. The price of gasoline is dropping, and it's not dropping insignificantly, and that's going to eventually result in the price of everything going down.
As long as those eggs go down.
And by the way, the unemployment, I think in the last 175,000 new jobs have been created in the American economy, by the way. So, people just relax. Oh, by the way, happy birthday, Orange Man Dad. What is he, 80 years old?
Yeah, he's going to be 80 on
he's like the ever-ready bunny. Yeah, he takes a licking, but he keeps on a ticking, and he's going to get her done, too. So everybody just relax.
That's it. Mark says just take a chill pill, guys. Relax. It's all going to work out in the end. I agree.
I actually totally agree. I think Mark has exactly the right view of this thing.
Yeah. Mark, thank you for the call. I appreciate it. But the point is, relax, right? We know exactly. We're watching what's going on in real time in Iran, right? We know that once this happens, it's going to, again, like so many things Trump does, and when you look at it, Jerry, from the 30,000 foot point of view here, you start to see the chess pieces that are being moved around and how they're connected from Venezuela, one of the largest oil reserves on the planet, right? How that's affecting Cuba, then how that affects Japan and China. And then you go into Iran and you got the Strait of Hormuz and Krug Island. It's all like, okay, and then how does that tie in to Russia, Ukraine, and what has Trump been saying? What did Trump try to tell Merkel, right? Ursula Merkel? He tried to tell Germany and most of Europe, the EU back then. Why are you getting your, relying so much for your energy from Russia? Why are you doing that? You're funding his aggression, and it's going to be a problem. And sure enough, and then all of a sudden, a pipeline, a deep sea pipeline, just blows up, and kills that source of oil. When you look at everything going on all at once, you start to see, well, there's a much bigger game going on here, and it's resetting, I think, the whole field when it's all said and
Joe,
done.
you are so totally correct about that. There's a much bigger game going on with all the pieces on the table being reset, right? That's exactly what it is. You're now going to have people who are thinking twice about buying oil from these, nefarious worldwide actors, right? These people have been causing trouble in the world for, more than a half a century, right? We don't have to deal with these people. We have plenty of oil. Remember, you hear that statistic just like I hear it, that the United States has more oil capacity than Saudi Arabia and Russia combined. We have more oil than Saudi Arabia and Russia combined now that we have Venezuela. I still don't know why Donald Trump doesn't go in and completely seize Krug Island. It's what he was speaking about himself, 30 or 40 years ago.
I was just going to say, you could go watch him say that on like Oprah, when she was still on the air. He was saying
I think
this.
we want to be careful of this. I get where I really do kind of understand where he's coming from, and that we want to be, careful about this American adventurism. We don't want this to turn into American adventurism, and we don't want to have a problem that we're, saddled with for the next 20 or 30 years. I think he really would rather, on the original plan, see the Iranian people rise up. And, I saw many, you and I spoke about this, Peter Balut and I spoke about this, where we saw many kind of Iranian, I would term them dissidents living here in the United States, who were intelligent, you could tell really good people, who were very certain that there was going to be an Iranian uprising. But, you have the RGC that seems to be, a real force of intimidation that is now running the country. And I think a lot of people are afraid for themselves, for the families and all this stuff. And if you, for a moment, put yourself in their positions, I think I would be pretty afraid too. Not so much for myself, but certainly for my family. And I think that that's the way that these thugs, kind of operate. But if we did have an Iranian uprising, and maybe they're still holding out hope for that somehow, then I think that, we wouldn't have to seize Krug Island. We could do a deal similar to what we did in Venezuela. How Venezuela right now, things seems to be in pretty good shape. You have all the executives from oil companies going in there and updating equipment and dumping a ton of money into that country. And, we have a flow of cash where the United States is going to benefit, the Venezuelan citizens are going to benefit. And that's a great model in some ways, not exactly analogous, but in some ways for Iran to look at. It could be a great model. That could be Iran. And then
it could be. We could also do this. I mean, the only way, like the IRGC, I mean, they're just intimidation, fear, your family, all of those tactics is how they hold control. I say, hey, why don't we airdrop just crates and crates of M16s and ammunition and see what happens? Like, arm the people. They've been disarmed. Let's arm the people and see whether or not they take the government back. They have been, look, that was a coup in 1979. I have said this a million times. We've been at war with Iran since 1979. They invaded sovereign American soil when they took our embassy. Absolutely. They took 52 hostages for 444 days, and then they proceeded to kill almost 2,000 Americans since then. Why do we pretend we're not at war with them? Why do we pretend this radical zealot religious organization who's the real incarnation of Handmaid's Tale, in essence, and we treat them like a legitimate regime, a legitimate government, I think the end goal, this should have been the time, because as long as you're allowing the mullahs in these caves to actually run that country, there will never be an end to death to America, death to Israel. It will never go away till we go back to pre-1979 Iran.
Well, yeah, and I do think that you have to have buy-in from the people, because we don't want to get again, it's one of these it could turn into a quagmire. We don't want to have an American presence there 30 or 40 years away, beyond just a business presence and a tourist presence and all of that stuff. But that is possible when you think about it. Tourism to Iran, right?
Yeah,
that was once a very usual thing.
We're against the clock. Are you staying over? Do you got to go?
Sure. I'll stay for another second,
all right,
Joe.
because
sure.
then we'll get the information about your upcoming seminars and all that. We'll do that when we come back on the other side, because I hate to always rush that at the end. But I call it Jerry's gigging when he does his gigs and he does your retirement seminars. But folks, you are tuned in here to the Joe Mangiacotti Show, Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. Stick with us. Back on the other side.
This is Radio Central, 830 WCRN, Worcester.
I'm Pam Puso. Manhunt in Ohio after gunfire erupts near a street festival in Toledo. 12 people were shot and wounded.
It's just a shame, when a few people, for whatever reasons, going through their head, decide to disrupt something that has been a beloved community event.
Police Lieutenant Dan Gherkin, cops believe at least 2 people fired weapons and were probably shooting at each other. More unrest outside an immigration detention center in New Jersey. Protesters say conditions inside are inhumane.
It isn't about the quality of detention. It's about detention. They don't want these people detained.
That's Borders Czar Tom Homan. America's listening to Fox News.
This is a special alert to all Americans who own a vehicle with less than 200,000 miles with an auto warranty about to expire or with no warranty coverage at all. Due to a decline in the economy, CarShield is announcing a low-cost month-to-month vehicle protection plan that is now available to the public to save any driver out-of-pocket expenses on future auto repairs. Call now to find out how you can pay almost nothing for covered auto repairs. Yes, you heard that correctly. Pay almost nothing for covered auto repairs. An open phone line has been established for all drivers to call for a free quick quote. Call 800-478-6430 now. Drivers who are covered will not have to pay for covered repairs again. This protection plan is at an all-time low. Additionally, drivers who activate this vehicle protection today will also receive free roadside assistance, free towing, and car rental options at no additional cost. Call us for your free quick quote today. 800-478-6430. That's 800-478-6430. What do you have to lose? Call 800-478-6430. Again, 800-478-6430.
All right, folks, welcome back here to hour 2 of the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. You can join the conversation at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. And of course, our text line is up and running at 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. And of course, 877-772-1776. Jerry, Ring of Independence. That's how you call Boston Independence Group. And again, let's do this because I don't like it when we have to rush because we got a break coming up. What do you got coming up for your seminars and your gigging?
For my gigging, Joe.
Gigging. So I run there. He puts a show on. It's like a rock star.
Well, Joe, it's a 5-hour course. It's not exactly a show.
Intermission and they flip the lights. You got to go back in.
Cut into 2.5-hour sessions at various colleges around. I obviously not holding any of them. Everybody, including me, is going to be on vacation during the month of July. But in August, September, October, November, I'll be back at the University of Massachusetts at Lowell, at Worcester State University, Framingham State University, Northern Essex Community College in Haverhill, and Dean College, your alma mater, in Franklin, Massachusetts. If you'd like to learn more, what you can do, and I encourage you to do this if you're close to retiring, just simply go to my website, which is bostonindependencegroup.com, bostonindependencegroup.com, and click on the events tab. And on there, you'll see the whole list of events that we have coming up. We publish them about 2 months in advance because you can register right online, or you can simply call my office at the telephone number Joe just mentioned, 877-772-1776, and you can register right through my office. Joe?
Yeah, Jerry. Fantastic. And again, there was a thing ringing in my ear. You said, you already said you have locations everywhere, right? So
pretty much.
Yeah. So you can set it up wherever you're going to go. All right, folks, 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. There's a few other, we covered a lot of the financial stuff, which is your wheelhouse. There's some other stuff I do want to talk to you about and get your dig on them. This whole California taking weeks and weeks to count, and that whole feeling, Jerry, that when you see these, they stop counting, and then in the middle of the night when these dumps happen, right? Voter dumps, and all of a sudden it changes everything. You gotta, the perception, right? The gut feeling is it doesn't smell right. It doesn't pass the odor test. What is going on? And, California is defending it. I go back to the stupidity of Gavin Newsom. You never thought you'd have those two words in the same sentence, right? Stupidity and Gavin Newsom. But they send ballots out to everybody. Talk about corruption, talk about fraud. Doesn't that just invite it? The same reason I've talked about this, I don't think that this voter registration thing should be a thing. I don't think that you should automatically be registered to vote. If you don't take the time and energy and effort to go register yourself to vote, there's a good chance you're not going to go vote. If you don't care enough to register, you're probably not going to get off your butt and go vote anyway. But if somebody registers you automatically and then a ballot shows up, are you going to even fill it out? It's arming votes. It's putting ones in the chamber as far as I'm concerned. I really think that we have to go back to, I want paper ballots. There's no reason that a counting machine should be connected to the internet. No reason in the world. It's a simple counting. The same number of people that walk in and check in and say 480 people walked into this polling place. The lady, it's always a lady wherever I go. It's always an older lady, two older ladies that seem to be friends for years, sit there at the table. Okay, Joe Mangiacotti, here's your address. They put the red line through it. You get your ballot. You do your thing. You go check out. You slide it into the box, and I watch the little ticker go up one. That's it. That's the level of technology we need to have at a polling place. And to have people automatically registered, I think that's dangerous. And if you can't physically go on election day, forget election month or months. If you can't go on that day, you do what we did pre-pandemic. You call your city clerk or your town clerk and say, I'm out of town, or I'm sick, or I have mobility issues, whatever. And they go, oh, no problem, Mr. Doherty. You're registered at this address. We're going to send you the ballot. You sign it. Someone witnesses. You send it back. That's all great. No. And during the pandemic, do you remember the stories of thousands of ballots on the side of the road? Thousands of ballots laying, hundreds at a condo complex or an apartment complex, just at the mailboxes, just laying there on the floor. That's craziness. It's crazy, Joe. So, with Peter Blute used to bring this up a lot, and he understands, in a lot of detail about running elections and voting, counting, and all this stuff like that. And Peter used to always bring up, he would say that, whenever you see voting that stops, or whenever you see delayed voting, that the only reason that happens, and I think he's correct about this, it is the only reason that it happens, is because somebody's trying to figure out where the vote count is and how many more votes they need to overcome whatever the deficit is. That's it. It's just somebody trying to assess where the elections are right now. So in California, where you have these remarkably delayed elections, it's amazing. I did read a statistic this weekend, which I believe to be true, but I only read it in one source, that apparently in the LA mayor's race right now,
there have been more votes counted than there are registered voters.
That's so right
And
there.
how
How does that happen?
And this is what Donald Trump brought up in the 2020 election as well. You know, in 2020, when he lost the election that he lost, in the 2020 election, he brought this up as well, that there were several counties where there were more votes counted than there were registered voters. That, to anybody, you have to say, it's a head scratcher.
Yeah.
You know, how can that possibly be? Clearly, there is something wrong there.
Yeah, because, and they got to do it with the mail-in ballots and all that, because you've got people, you know, observers at the polling place, and each party is counting, and you got the exits. So you know that X number of people physically went to the polls. So they pack it, and I agree 100% that they've got to pause for a minute to figure out what do we need. And then when we have, like Gary brought up from North Attleboro in the first half hour, the story about the fact that, okay, you get this dump of ballots that showed up. You know, they kind of magically show up. And in the Pratt race, the LA mayor race, on all the ballots, there were only votes for Karen Bass. That was it. None of the other races got voted in on that. So that tells you something too. 508-871-7000. Folks, that's how you join the conversation. It's always been the same number. Let's go to Ken in New Hampshire. Good morning, Ken. You're on with Jerry Doherty and myself as we are barreling into the summer in June here.
Good morning, Joe and Jerry.
Morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to pick up Mark's call and declare today Humility Sunday. Because if we look back 3 months and 1 week ago when this war in Iran started, nobody predicted what has transpired. Let me just cite one thing that I don't care where you are on left, right, center. Who could have predicted the Strait of Hormuz would be closed for over 3 months and the price of oil $90 a barrel? Come on. The experts would have said 150 to 200, right? Right, Jerry?
Absolutely. As it has been, Ken, by the way, in previous conflicts, oil has definitely gone to $150 a barrel. Oil has not moved. It's moved above $100 a barrel, but generally speaking, it hasn't moved much above $100 a barrel in this whole conflict, which, to your point, Ken, is just remarkable.
So we don't have all the answers as to why that occurred, but we have some of the answers. Well, who could have predicted the UAE would leave OPEC? Anybody?
Not me.
No, absolutely.
So what's that all about? Oh, simple explanation there. You know what the UAE was prior to the war starting? They were basically the financiers of all of what was Iran. They're sort of their bank, piggy bank, to get around all the sanctions and the stuff. And then Iran starts shooting at them, worse than any other nation, simply because they're a bunch of punks. They weren't going to shoot at us because it's going to be bad. So they punched down at their financiers. Who could have? Well, they were just dumb in what they did. And the consequences is, well, the UAE is avoiding the strait. They have a pipeline, and they're going full out, pump, 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 pump. And Saudi Arabia is sending from east across to the Suez because they're going full boat. And whatever else everybody else is doing, this 20% of the world's oil supply is not so much a problem. So now what's Iran going to do? We don't need them. The rest of the world doesn't need them so much now, do they?
Yeah, and from what I'm understanding with some of the articles I'm reading, right, Saudi Arabia, other nations in the Middle East, they're going, hey, let's look at options of pipelines and other ways, like, and cut Iran out of the deal, because it goes back to my point. As long as the same people, right, meaning the imams in the caves, in the Republican Guard, in that ilk of people are running it, they're always going to have a problem, right? Because It's being run. It's Islamic and by the Muslims who feel that the whole world needs to be that. And this is the whole thing, right? Death to America, death to Israel, wipe Israel off the face. Then they're going to come after us. If that's who's running this, we're always going to have this problem. It's not going to go away. And, you know, Trump talked about, okay, they thought they were slick when they were doing the negotiations about they can't ever build a nuclear weapon. And then all of a sudden it dawned on us, apparently, we better include in that you can't buy a nuclear weapon from somebody else and go to that. You can't have it. I go back to, you got to change the regime, or we don't have to, but until Iran changes their regime and they go back to, you know, a non-religious entity running that country, we're always going to have a trouble. So now you have, like I said, Saudi Arabia, Oman, all them saying, hey, let's build pipelines, and they have some pipelines that they can expand, and cut the need for Iran to control everything. And the other thing Trump is saying, right, there will be no toll, right? The Strait of Hormuz and this will be open for everybody for trade, and there'll be no tolls. That's how they've held, including their brethren, right? Brother nations, they are hostage because of the Strait of Hormuz. And he's got to negate that. I mean, first he flipped the script by putting our own blockade in. They didn't see that coming. You can't tell me they worked that out in the war room because they underestimated the United States, or they underestimated Trump.
Joe, our blockade was brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
Jerry mentioned, well, why aren't we going after cargo? Why do we have to go? Why do we have to land on any land in Iran and risk our troops being killed? We don't.
Yeah, we control the waterway.
What we did in April is working like a charm. So you have two parties blockading the Strait of Hormuz, Iran and us. And the barrel of oil is down to $90. It was as high as, I think, 115. So why wouldn't it, over time, isn't it just going to keep going down because people are going to find alternatives? And effectively, it's the IRGC that's controlling Iran. So they don't even have a supreme leader anymore. We don't even know if he's really alive.
Right. I mean, the president came out the other day to try to he tried to resign. I don't think they let him, right? And because he said, I'm a puppet. I have no authority here. I can't make any decisions. It is the IRGC. It's the humans in the caves. So he tried to resign, but they won't let him resign. You know, he can put the suit on, the tie on, and pretend, but he has no power. And that was a problem we had during the negotiations. We would sit there with this negotiation, but as soon as there was a point to be made, agreed upon, on the other side of the table, they'd have to say, all right, well, we have to travel back to Iran, go up into the cave. We got to ask if this is okay. And that's when Trump finally said, you know what? We're not doing this. I'm not sending Rubio and representatives over there, 14-hour flight for that crap. So pick up the phone when you really, you have somebody who can make decisions and really make decisions and actually negotiate on the behalf of Iran. We'll actually sit at the table. Otherwise, forget about it. And Trump has never taken the option of going back to the assault, right? Back to doing it the hard way. He keeps saying we can do it with a piece of paper, meaning, a treaty agreement here, or we can go back to finishing off what we started.
Ken, I think you bring up a really good point about, what Trump is doing, what he started is working. But I do think that there is that clock that's ticking. I hope that most Americans think like you do and like I do, and that they're going to be patient with this because, again, to your point, we don't have to risk any American lives. We don't want any American casualties. We don't want any boots on the ground. The strategy Trump put into place is working. But those midterm elections, I mean, here we sit now, essentially almost in the middle of June. And, these midterm elections are in November. And I hope that message is being given to the average American person in the circle of people that I hang around with, Ken, but it's probably more a reflection of who I am. And it's probably the same in your world as well. You probably hang around with people who are similar to you. I think people have that message and they're willing to wait and they're willing to be patient. But this could be a disaster for Trump in the midterms if we end up, with gasoline still in the price range that it is right now. And yes, it has come down. There's no question over the past couple of weeks, but still, it still is pretty high.
But Jerry,
yeah,
with what we've experienced the past 3 months,
yeah,
and particularly the past month, why wouldn't it be reasonable to predict that this downward trend is going to continue, that by October, the barrel of oil will be at about $75 to $80 a barrel, and we'll be paying $3.25 to $3.50 a gallon in gas? And what's going to be the public reaction to that? Because all they've heard from the media is, "Oh, terrible gas prices."
Yeah, no, listen, I agree with you. I agree with you 100%. I think that, part of it is the mainstream media. We tend to talk about them a lot, and I'm not talking about them in a blaming way, but I saw an interview last night on CNN, with Jessica Dean, where she interviewed Kevin McCarthy, and the questions she was asking him were naive. They were stupid. They were naive questions. And Kevin McCarthy kept on coming back to the reality that, gasoline prices are elevated. And she also was, stuck on that one myopic issue about gasoline prices. Kevin McCarthy was saying, well, what about the jobs report? What about the inflation not spiking? What about, to the point
it doesn't help her narrative, Jerry.
Joe, her questions were so naive. I was amazed. I kind of think Jessica Dean does a pretty good job, but I was amazed. And it was also such a negative slant. But Ken, to your point, that's the problem, is that this is what the media is kind of putting out there, that it's all negativity. They're not putting out this positive stuff. And we have the midterm elections not that far away. It is a little bit concerning. But I do think, and this is what I love about Donald Trump, I do think he's very serious in that he is not going to make a bad deal at the sake of making a deal. He's not going to do that. For the sake of making a deal, he's not going to make a bad deal. It's just not going to happen. It's either going to be the right deal or he's not going to do any deal. And relative to military action, the guy is a builder. I mean, he is literally a builder. I don't think he wants to go in and completely decimate this country. I think it's against his nature, because he understands that at some point the country is going to be rebuilt. And the more that you blow this thing to smithereens, the harder it makes that job and the longer it takes to do that.
Yeah. And he's thinking of Trump in an international Iran. I mean, that's down the road somewhere, right? Don Jr. is going to be running that project. But how people understand this is by looking at the stock market, because the money managers in Wall Street, they get it. Because if they thought this was going to be prolonged and be a big problem, we'd have a problem in the stock market. But we've broken records in the stock market, so they're confident. Doesn't that show confidence in the money managers, Jerry, that they know this is a temporary, and they know Trump is going to bring this home at some point in the relative near future?
They do. I think it shows that they're aligned with Ken's mentality. I think it shows that they're aligned with Ken, kind of philosophically, that they believe that, oil prices are going to be coming down, that, inflation hasn't spiked as we've seen. We haven't had these runaway, prices in oil. And I think that they think that in the long term, this thing is going to be to the benefit, not only of the American economy, but also to the security of America. Kevin McCarthy was heavy into that. Let's think about, what we're doing. This is a long-term play for the security of America. Think about what a relatively peaceful Middle East would mean for the world, and the expense that America has to dump in there with all these military actions that we've engaged in, almost on a monthly basis for the past 50 years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jerry?
Yeah.
Jerry, you described a journalist asking McCarthy economic questions, right?
Yep.
Do you think that journalist ever took a course in economics or business?
I don't know anything about her, but I'd answer no. Right. I agree.
They know nothing. Why do we listen to them? Ignore them.
We don't. And look, I think the reality is a lot of these national news people, there's an appearance aspect to this thing. I don't see many ugly news people out there. I think I see more people who look like Jessica Dean. I mean, I'm not, you know, she certainly seems somewhat intelligent to me, but I think, you know, certainly Ken, based upon her questions last night, she has a basic fundamental, you know, non-understanding of economics and so on. But she certainly is attractive. She certainly is articulate. And yeah, and I think she can read the questions that are put in front of her pretty well. But that's the problem. It's a very visual media, right? Medium. I wonder what, you know, happened to the Walter Cronkites of the world, you know. But it's switched. You know, it's you know, kind of attractive people. I'm sure it's the same for men as well.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. Final thought, Ken. We're moving along.
This proves my point. Don't go to TV. I use YouTube. I wish I could Rumble instead, but they don't do as good a job of feeding me good stuff. But YouTube's got great information. I learned a lot more than I ever would watching YouTube.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Ken.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the call. Appreciate it, folks. 508-871-7000 to join the conversation. That's 508-871-7000. That's how you get into the studio for two-way talk and conversation. Jerry Doherty in virtual studio with me. We talked about the inflation issue. We talked about the jobs number. A little more on the mayor's race, Pratt. Do you think he's going to pull this out, Jerry? I mean, he's got.
I think he's going to be. I hope he's going to be in the top two.
Yeah.
And if he isn't in the top two, you know, then I think, you know, I already know that there are some federal investigations going on already. But clearly, in California, everybody must be saying, you know, why can't we count these ballots in a reasonable amount of time? And again, to Peter Blut's, you know, point that he brought up countless times over the years that I joined him. Whenever the voting stops and whenever the voting is prolonged and you don't have good, clean numbers, it's only because somebody wants to know where the vote count is. And they want to know where the vote count is because they want to know what the deficit is that they have to overcome. So the woman who's in third place in the LA mayor's race, I forget her name now, but she clearly, you know, the Democrat, and she's crazy. She's, you know, really, really, really liberal, you know. Yeah. So she, I think that, you know, the Democrat machine in California wants to figure out where she is relative to Spencer Pratt and see what the deficit is. But I think this is, you know, I think it's it's outrageous that you can have an election and they might not know the results for 30 days. This is the United States of America in 2026. You know, again, when you look at states like Florida is really kind of the poster child for this. They have elections when the voting stops within a matter of hours, certainly within 12 hours, they have the vote count done. And, you know, we should be able to do that everywhere in the United States. 30 days?
In California,
it's like 100 years ago. They probably did it quicker 100 years ago.
They did, because they had the Pony Express would take the ballots and run them real quick. But I mean, you talk about California, right? Silicon Valley, the tech capital of the country type of thing, right? And these people, and you got brilliant, right? The brain trust that exists in parts of there, but yet they can be so smart and then so stupid on so many things, especially when they don't understand that what they're dealing with. And I think Pratt, what I'm saying on that is, you're so smart, but you keep voting for the same type of people. They're all interchangeable, right? It doesn't, to me, it doesn't matter when you get real progressive left, when they try to out left each other. But you wonder why things are the way they are, and you're stepping over needles and feces, and you've got in Khan, that one, the third one, by the way, when she said, and the clip went viral because she said, what is the big deal? What does it matter if there is a tent 50 feet away from a schoolyard? Because the topic was homelessness in this. And she's saying she didn't see any problem with a homeless encampment being 50 feet outside of a school playground.
Well, this is the thing, too. You know, when you look at the governor's race with Steve Hilton, they talk, and Spencer Pratt has spoken about this as well, certainly, but they talk about the number of mothers in California. I hope that woman, the third place woman, keeps on saying that, because that's going to drive, you know, women who have children at those schools.
And that's what Pratt is
to the other candidate.
His voting is the mothers.
Yes. And his whole slogan, I think it's a brilliant slogan, you know, look around, to your point, Joe. You know, it's kind of like Donald Trump saying, in the
But he got
2016
to
election.
lose.
What do you have to lose?
Yeah, that's
This is
it.
the same way. Just look around. Do you want to live like this? And there's no reason to. We're better than this.
And we should be. And you know, and again, and we've talked about it a million times, for the first time in the history of California, have more people got the hell out of there than moved there. It's been the golden state. It has the mountains, in the forests, in the ocean, and just beautiful weather, has everything you want. And of course, the capital, right? Hollywood has been shifting out of there, right? We see stuff moving to Nashville, in Georgia, and just getting out of Hollywood because you don't have to be there anymore. So look, I want California to do well because it's a crown jewel of the United States. It's part of us, and the policies have killed it. And I don't understand why you think you're going to get different results voting the same people in. But we're against the clock. Jerry Doherty again. Let's roll your number to Boston Independence Group.
My telephone number for retirement planning, the firm that I own, Boston Independence Group. The telephone number there, very easy to remember telephone number, Joe, 877-772-1776.
All right, Jerry Doherty, thank you. Enjoy
Thank
the
you,
rest of
Joe.
your day. All right,
Okay,
folks, stick
you
with
too.
us. We'll be back on the other side. Bring into hour 3 of the Sunday edition.
This summer, celebrate the 4th of July at Fuller Park like never before. It's America's 250th birthday, and we're having a July Family Fest. Family fun, then watch Field of Dreams, followed by a grand display of spectacular Unibank fireworks. Tickets are on sale now at fullerpark.com/familyfest. Happy 250th, America.
Headline news, weather, and local information. 830 WCRN.
I'm Lee Gaudette from Gaudette Insurance and the Gaudette Insurance Show. You're listening to Radio Central, AM 830 WCRN.
Never miss any of your favorite programs on Radio Central WCRN. For on-demand replays of this and other shows, visit WCRNradio.com. Learn how you can make your retirement exactly what you want it to be. Join attorney Jeff Monfett for Retirement Security every Monday and Friday afternoon at 2. Set the stage for a worry-free retirement with Retirement Security right here on Full Service Radio, AM 830 WCRN.
Bad decisions limit future options. Stop adversity from becoming stress. Listen to The Float Line with Rick Hughes, Sundays at 8:30 a.m. Problem-solving devices built on God's Word. Inspiration and education, all without manipulation. Sundays at 8:30 a.m.
Shop local and listen local. Live and local radio every day on Radio Central, 830 WCRN.
All right, folks. Welcome back here to the second half of the second hour on the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show here on AM 830 WCRN. Of course, you know the number to join the conversation, 508-871-7000, 508-871-7000. Russ will get you set up into the studio for two-way talk and conversation. And, of course, our text line at 617-297-8388. 617-297-8388, and that appears on the screen here in the studio in real time, and then we can try to work it into the conversation. And you know, to Jerry's point, it's not just some of these mainstream media people that are just in that bubble and so naive. And you know, Scott Bassett, he does a great job. Marco Rubio, right? That whole thing where that very young congresswoman, I think she thought, you know, whatever her staff wrote up with the shoes But here's the thing. She starts making comments about his shoes, and his shoes were too big. Because if you remember the whole thing, Trump was sitting with Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio. You look down at the shoes, and he's like, oh, God, guys, your shoes are horrible, right? Members of my cabinet can't be having these shoes. And he orders them each a couple pair of shoes right there. And so the Congresswoman, Democrat, like so many on the far left who have gone to blue sky, right? Elon bought X, or bought Twitter, made it X. And so they all vacated. They all ran over to blue sky. I've never been on it, but this is where they are. But the problem is, guys, they're in this echo chamber of each other, this bubble on blue sky. So here's this Congresswoman who's thinking, I don't know what she's thinking. Is this clever, witty? She's going to really get Marco Rubio because the shoes, and they're on blue sky going, oh, Trump bought him shoes and the shoes were too big. And she goes in on this, and Rubio's like, what are you talking about? She says, but your shoes look fantastic. And he's like, how do you even know that? Are you kidding me? Is this an oversight, Senate oversight committee or circus? What the hell is going on? They don't want to talk about the real issues. To Jerry's point with the CNN interview. No, she's going to ignore all the data that says, hey, things are going pretty well, and she's going to concentrate on the gas. Why is the gas? Well, because when it did go higher, right? I mean, they were paying what, $7 and change out in California. They're always a couple of dollars higher because of the way they are set up with taxes. But here's the thing, right? When you're talking to somebody who has no clue about the economy, but they're drilling somebody like a Scott Bassett about this, and she keeps talking to him. We're going to talk about this Congresswoman, Judy Cho, right? She's talking about the IRS and the audit and everything. And Scott Bassett's not in charge of the IRS, nor is he the Attorney General. It's as if she doesn't understand the roles of the parts of government. And there are moments in Congress when that curtain slips, right? The script breaks. The American people get a clean look at what is really going on. In this Judy Chu exchange with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, it's one of those moments. It was the House and Ways Committee meeting. Cho tried to grill him over President Trump, right? The Iran conflict, the financial pressure on American families. Other than gas is a little high, I don't know if there's a lot of financial pressures that have to do with the Iran war. She had the whole production ready, right? She really thought she was going to get this guy. The accusation, the indignation, the staffer holding up a sign behind her, because in modern Washington, if you do not have a poster board, are you even pretending to govern? Don't you need those props? So Chu asked Bessent whether she agreed with President Trump that he does not care about Americans' financial situations, which is ludicrous on its face, but okay. And let's be honest, this is not oversight. This is theater. It's performative. It's not a serious question. It's a campaign dressed up as a congressional hearing. And then Bessent turned the whole thing around with one simple question. Who was president during World War I? It shouldn't be a difficult question, especially sitting in a hearing room in Washington, D.C. And this is a conversation between a cabinet secretary and a sitting member of Congress. Who was the president during World War I? And Congresswoman Judy Chu, who was standing there lecturing Treasury Secretary about war and economics and presidential leadership and the American taxpayer, did not know. Now, of course, the answer is Woodrow Wilson, Massachusetts guy, right? Not obscure. I mean, yeah, maybe some people would have a hard time with some of the non-memorable presidents. Certainly presidents who weren't sitting presidents during time of a world war, say, right? So not exactly an obscure administration. Not exactly a deep-cut final Jeopardy question are we dealing with here. It's a basic American history question. This is high school civics. This is the kind of thing we used to expect people in Congress to know before they started lecturing us. But that is the problem in DC today. Too many politicians are prepared for the performance, not the subject. They are prepared for the clip. They need that TikTok viral clip, right? They're not prepared for the facts. They are prepared to accuse, not to understand, certainly not to have a conversation. Chu came in swinging with a talking point and got knocked over by a history question. And here is the serious point under all of this errors of comedy here. History matters. And when members of Congress talk about war, national debt, inflation, and taxation, and presidential authority, and the financial sacrifices of American families, they should have at least a working knowledge of the past. Don't you agree? World War I was not trivia. It was one of the defining events of the 20th century. It reshaped global power, certainly American foreign policy, the presidency, the economy, and the role of the U.S. in the world. And if you are going to use war as a political weapon in a hearing, you should probably know who was president during one of the most consequential wars in modern history. But Democrats have become very comfortable substituting outrage for knowledge, right? They don't need history. They have hashtags, right? They don't need economics. They have slogans. And they don't need facts. They have staffers with signs. Might even have a chat, a graph or a chart too. Right? And then, every now and then, someone will ask a basic question, and the whole set collapses. This is why Americans are so frustrated. We're so tired of being lectured by people who seem to know less about the country than the people paying their salaries. So the next time Judy Chu wants to stage this dramatic hearing moment, maybe the staffer, she'll hold up a different sign. One that says Woodrow Wilson. That would make the point. Unbelievable. But this is what we're dealing with, right? This is what we're dealing with. 508-871-7000. That's how you join the conversation. Lines are open and available. We can also talk about anything you'd like to bring up as well today. I've got all my notes and talking points, and I told you coming up in the 11 o'clock hour, real life Langdon, right? Remember Robert Langdon from the Da Vinci Code? We got a guy who's pretty much the real living version of that character from the Tom Hanks movie. 508-871-7000. Let's go to Tom in Lunenburg. Hey, Tom, what say you?
Hey, good morning. Good morning. Hey, you were talking about saving oil and all this. You know what they used to do years ago? The governor would get on TV, tell the people, you want to lower gas prices? Stop driving. She'd get on there. I remember years ago.
Yeah, Jimmy Carter used to tell us to wear a sweater. Remember that?
Oh, but these people are blameless. I've seen friends of mine with a full-ton pickup trucks go down, they'll drive 2 miles to get one pack of cigarettes, come back constantly. Or they go to the package store, get a six-pack of beer with a pickup truck. You know how much gas you multiply that by all instances like that? You're wasting a hell of a lot of gas. The governor, right, years ago would say, go shuttles. There's a group they should nail. School teachers. You go in the parking lot and count how many school teachers' cars. You're talking maybe 100, 200 in a school. If they had a shuttle bus, pick them up in the morning, drop them up, You'd save a lot of gas. Hello?
Yeah, but I
Oh,
think
I
you're
didn't know
being
if I was wrong.
facetious, right?
No, this is the truth. They should do. They used to have shuttles. Companies, when I worked for high tech, they
Oh,
do
okay.
it with
Yeah,
them.
with the private
And
sector.
you
Look,
made it.
look, a lot of these private sector places. I mean, look, we saw the whole tech industry, right? I mean, what did we find out when Elon Musk did buy Twitter? He went in there, and what's one of the things? I mean, he cut the staff big time, like 80%. I mean, it was silly. And the people say, "How can you do that?" And he said, "Well, it's still running perfectly, right? Maybe even better." But these places, and again, that's private industry. There's a big difference, Tom, when we talk about taxpayer stuff, government stuff, and then private industry. But if they want to put meditation centers in their corporate offices, if they want to have green campuses, that's all up to them, and that's on their dime. And that's fine. You know what? I if I ever worked a corporate job, I probably would like it. I don't know if I'd like to have a shuttle pick me up. I kind of like to have my independence of my own vehicle. I'm not a big public transportation guy. I never have been, even when I lived in the city. But that's all up to individual choices.
No, but that's what's causing all the problems. That's what's causing high gas prices, and they're not smart enough to see it.
No. Tom, let's back up here. Are you saying what's causing the high gas prices? Are people aren't carpooling enough?
No, they're driving too much, useless. They're driving, I can drive, so craziness. They're not driving for a purpose. Do you understand? Like you're going to work.
Tom, let's get something. America, let's talk about America. America, we are an automobile nation. I grew up, right, and back in the days when I was a kid, going for a ride was normal, right? Dad would say, everybody in the car, we're going for a ride. Where are we going? Nowhere. Maybe we're going to just stop and get ice cream, or we're just going to take a ride through the country, or we're going to go somewhere and watch a waterfall. In other words, we have been a nation of vehicles and traveling and independence ever since the car came on the scene, right? And I don't think that should change. I don't want it to change. Now, don't get me wrong. I think it's horrible. I think it's horrible that we've lost the train industry to the way we did, because I like train travel. I've taken the train to DC. I've taken the train to New York. I like train travel, and I think it's a mode of transportation and a mode of art that we've lost. Now, we lost it because, Detroit wanted to sell buses in the 60s, in the 50s and 60s, GMC, and they wanted to do away with trains so they could sell more buses. That being said, I would never give up my car. Just because I like train travel doesn't mean that I'm going to do it. We're a country that has always driven, Tom, and it's not a waste. First of all, I think we've established we have more oil than we need, right? We can produce all the oil we need to drive our cars. Plus, I think eventually we're going to start other things. I don't think electric, I've always said this, electric isn't the answer to the cars and transportation. I think hydrogen is, right? When you start separating the hydrogen from water in the oxygen, we have cars that are running on hydrogen. Sweden has it. I think that's a future, Tom.
Yeah, Eddie, you're missing the point. You missed the whole point. You roll right over it.
Yeah, your point. Let me get it straight. You're saying that we're driving too much.
Listen to this. Back then, they were paying 49 cents a gallon. So it was
Tom.
nothing.
So my question is to you: what is enough? What is too much? And who the hell decides that I'm driving too much? You? Are you going to decide if I drive too much?
Yes. When you're taking gasoline from somebody else and they're paying $4.50 a gallon, when you were paying 49 cents a gallon, you could pre-ride. But not at $4.50 when it's taking a big chunk of your income to go into gasoline, but there's a way of bringing it down and nobody's doing it.
Again, Tom, the problem isn't we don't have a problem with lack of gasoline. We have all the gasoline we want in the world. But you can't decide that. We are a country we're an automobile nation, right? And we're going to we love our cars. I collect cars. I have a car collection. I mean, I love cars. I love older cars. It's a hobby of mine. There are people out there who show the cars and they do the drive-ins. You got people who go cross country trips. Are you saying that we shouldn't be allowed to drive unless we're driving to work, and then we need to use a shuttle to get to work?
You're missing the point again.
No, you keep repeating the point, but I think it's an asinine point. You keep saying we're driving too much.
If it was so bad, why did the government demand it? Back in 1940 during the war, they came up with ration books on gasoline.
Well, wait a minute, Tom. You can't apply the circumstances of a world war to everyday life. Of course, gas was rationed. So was milk and bread and eggs. And guess what? Not only that, they were confiscating gold, and we were collecting scraps, right? The kids used to walk through the streets with the wagons, collecting metal and steel so they could make tanks and ships. But that was a world war, Tom. You can't make those rules. You can't apply those rules. Of course, we had rationing in a world war. But when the war was over, the economy boomed. And you know what else boomed? Detroit. Do you know how many cars started rolling off? And first of all, let's even back up. We were making cars before we entered World War II. In 1939, we were pulled out of the Depression because of a world war we weren't in yet, but manufacturing in this country started to gear up, pulled us out of the Great Depression, which we had been in for 10 years. And then we turned around. And when Japan attacked Pearl Harbor, and the Admiral said, "We have woken a sleeping giant," you know what he meant by that? There's about 4 layers to that. Okay, one is, and it wasn't just the American military. That's not what he was talking about. It was part of it. But he was talking about, the fact that there's a rifle behind every blade of grass. And then he was talking about the fact that, you have this massive 3,000-mile continent, unlike Japan, that was an island that had to import everything. Oil, energy, everything, steel. They didn't have any of this. And at that point, the United States of America was producing over 60% of the steel in the world. He was talking about the fact that when America changes its, from shops and shopkeepers and doctors and lawyers and farmers to a war mode, that we are going to outproduce every nation on the planet. And that's exactly what we did. What that admiral was talking about and what he had to explain to the high command and the imperial command in Japan was, when America turns Detroit on, we're in trouble, because we have to get by mountains and deserts and vast amounts of land to get to DC. And unlike Japan, if Tokyo is captured, they surrender. You capture Washington, we move our government to Detroit. You get Detroit, we move it to Denver. You get Denver, we're going to move it to another. That's what he was talking about. And what did Detroit do? We started turning out Jeeps, right? Quickly made, efficiently made. At one point, Tom, the United States of America, we were turning out a B-29 every hour. We built a Liberty ship in 4 days and 15 hours. What Germany totally they totally miscalculated was the ability that we had to turn on that war machine. Germany was obsessed with precision and making their tanks and their vehicles. We put these Jeeps out, we put these tanks out, and that's what they miscalculated, because when we came with waves and waves. You blew our tank out, that's okay. There's 10 of them right behind it. And that's what happened. And when the war was over, we switched back to vehicles, and car ownership shot through the roof. And we went to 2-car families, and we had the interstate and Route 66. We are a nation of car lovers. We are a nation of independence. We're a nation of people who love their vehicles. And to say the problem is that we drive too much, I think it's totally missing the point.
The governor in Massachusetts, why was she enacting a miles tax? You're around so many miles a year, maybe 1,500, and that's it. You go over that like they do in the lease cars. You go over that, you're going to get hit with a high tax on every mile.
Why? I don't want to live in that country, Tom. I don't want to live, Tom. You want to live in a country where the government's going to tell you how many miles you can drive? Right? We've already dealt with telling you how big your slushy can be, how big your big gulp can be. They want to tell us that we can't use gas ranges. They want to tell us that we can't barbecue. Are you kidding me? Leave the cars alone. And if I want to drive, first of all, I don't drive a great number. Everybody has a different thing. First of all, you understand that overall the number of miles driven in the United States since the pandemic, and I'm not talking the height of the pandemic when everything was shot. I'm talking about today. One of the results of the pandemic that we saw was the remote working, right? And guys like Jamie Dimon and stuff is saying, hey, get back to the office. But people have realized that they can work remotely and they can work from home. So our level of driving has actually dropped post-pandemic because more people are working either, a hybrid, couple days in the office and the rest at home. So they're not commuting as much. So the average miles driven per year by Americans has dropped since 2025. All right. So that's happening. But second of all, I don't think it's the government's role to limit what we're allowed to drive. It isn't a supply. We have all the oil we need. We don't need to. And when this Iran conflict is done and oil goes back down to $65, $62 a barrel and gas goes down to about $2 a gallon, are you going to have a problem with it then?
What about why is the butane with $4.60 a gallon? If that was the case, you'd be paying $2 right now, $1.75.
Look, Tom, I just don't agree. We're fine on this. I don't want it. Thank you for the call. I appreciate it. I do not want the government dictating how many miles I can drive. I don't want them dictating any of those decisions that we make, and I don't think we should be punished. You sound like one of these Democratic lawmakers in Massachusetts who wants to throw a gantry up on every roadway and tax you for every mile that you drive. That's not about gas. That's just about raising revenue. 508-871-7000. Hey, Tom from Brockton, what say you?
Thank you, sir. May I please have another?
I know, right?
Thank you, sir. May I please have another?
Wow.
This is the problem with this state, is you have people like that think that we can just solve the transportation problem with mass transit. It's not going to work. In Massachusetts, its population from the early 2000s was 6.1 million people. It is now up to 7.3 million. Where did that increase come from? Immigration, both lawful and unlawful. So, if you're getting pissed off that, when I was a union electrician, I used to work in Boston. I could leave my house in Brockton in 2018, the last year I worked, from about 10 minutes to 6 o'clock and be on the job site at Longfellow Bridge, 10 minutes to 7. And now that same commute, because I have to go into Mass General every now and then for medical issues, even at 10 o'clock in the morning, it'll take me clear near an hour and a half if there's an accident on 93. And the thing is that these people just buy into whatever is spoon-fed to them. And, it's like, if we all go electric, we're going to solve climate change. No, we're not, because China is still building coal-fired power plants. They have almost 1,200 now that are not required to have scrubbers. Yeah. The United States has between 200 and 220 that are mandated to have scrubbers on them. And for the ignorant people out there that don't know what a scrubber is, it takes out all the particulates of when the coal ash is burned. Mm-hmm. All right, which cause acid rain, if you remember that term back in the 80s.
Oh God,
we don't have that problem. We don't have that problem anymore in
in the New England region. Why? Because we don't have coal burners anymore. Number two, the coal burners that were there had to have scrubbers on them. You know, when you try and use logic with these people, it just goes on one ear and out the other because it just breaks their narrative. And it reminds me of 1971 when my older brother told me that TV wrestling was fake. And when he said, how the hell can Chief Jay Strongbow beat the crap out of Haystacks Calhoun 5 nights a week and, you know, not recover from serious injuries?
Yeah.
And I had my hands over my ears because I didn't want to face up to reality. I was 11 years old. And then slowly but surely it started sinking in that, you know what, this is all an act. It's theatrics.
Yeah.
And I was
Tom, I
heartbroken.
gotta say to your point about that, right? I mean, you got India and China, the biggest polluters, and to tell Americans we got to do all of this for climate change, it's like saying, well, we have a peeing section in the pool. No, it does. If you know, where are those activists? Why aren't they going after China, India to get them squared away? And as long as they're doing it, guess what? That air eventually comes over the United States. So, hey, Tom. Thank you for the call. Against the clock, we get a break and come back with a third and final hour. Scott Wolter is going to join us. The real live Robert Langdon in studio. So stick with us. We'll be back on the other side, folks.
Headline news, weather, and local information. 830 WCRN.
News, I'm Pam Crusoe. Testing the ceasefire. The U.S. and Iran have traded fire this weekend in the absence of an agreement to end the conflict.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah.
There you are. Sorry about that. I mean, we're still streaming live, but what's going out over the radio station is the commercial right now.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
so I just want to make sure your camera looks good. Your microphone. Are you using earbuds or speaker?
I'm just using the speaker. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you okay. Yeah. Sometimes
Okay,
it's just a little echoey, but we're good. So what we'll do is we got a 2-minute break. We'll come in. I'll do the reset up, and then we'll join it again.
Okay.
The levels
Well,
are
we've
good?
got some cool things to talk about. It's a crazy day here, so I'll fill you in.
I'm looking forward to it. I've been looking forward to this for a while. And you got good. You just froze for a second. Are you plugged in or do you have Wi-Fi?
I have Wi-Fi, but
Are
I
you-
just
are you
got
near the
brand
router?
new service, so
Okay. Hopefully that won't be a problem. If the router's fairly close, we should be good.
okay.
All right. Let's. You'll hear it. You'll see it. Here we go.
Sounds good.
On future auto repairs. Call now to find out how you can pay almost nothing for covered auto repairs. Yes, you heard that correctly. Pay almost nothing for covered auto repairs. An open phone line has been established for all drivers to call for a free quick quote. Call 800-478-6430 now. Drivers who are covered will not have to pay for covered repairs again. This protection plan is at an all-time low. Additionally, drivers who activate this vehicle protection today will also receive free roadside assistance, free towing, and car rental options at no additional cost. Call us for your free quick quote today. 800-478-6430. That's 800-478-6430. What do you have to lose? Call 800-478-6430. Again, 800-478-6430.
All right, folks. Welcome back here to the third and final hour of the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show on AM 830 WCRN. This hour brought to you by Heart to Home Meals, right? So if you need either for your parents or for yourself, these are custom menus and they deliver it straight to your home. Dedicated driver, great customer service. We'll talk a little bit more about it. Heart to Home Meals. Check them out. You, of course, can join the conversation at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. That will get you into the studio for two-way talk and conversation. Russ is back at HQ behind the glass flying the board. Our text line is up and running at 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. And it appears on the screen here in studio in real time, and we work it into the conversation. Now, my next guest, Scott Wolter, geologist, petrographer, author, and in many ways, the real life Robert Langdon. Remember in the Da Vinci Code, Tom Hanks played a Harvard professor who decoded symbols and religious iconology and hidden messages buried in plain sight. Well, Scott does something very similar, only his evidence is carved in stone and etched into artifacts, hidden in ruins and connected to some of the biggest historical mysteries of all time, right? From the Kensington Rune Stone to the Hooked X from Oak Island to the Knights Templar. Scott has spent years challenging the official timeline and asking whether America's history began much earlier and much differently than we were taught. Hey, Scott, welcome to the program. Excited to have you here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm I'm excited to be here, and oh my gosh, what an amazing time to be alive, huh?
Well, you are constantly looking back at history and decoding and putting things together. And it must be, I mean, every day must be exciting for you, right? Because it's like you don't know if you're going to find a new clue to, because look, I gave up what we read in school, what I was taught in 5th grade and all of that. I've come to realize that's a, I don't know, a packaged history that they need to put in this universal curriculum. I have, for the last several years, Scott, man, I am obsessed with the History Channel and those I call them the upper cable channels, even though I haven't had cable in years, but you know what I mean? The Discovery Channel and the History Channel and all these different documentaries, whether it's the Knights Templar or they're talking about Egyptology and discoveries that are being made. And you're like, why doesn't everybody know this stuff? Right. And then you find out, that they were drilling for or digging for something, and 200, 300 feet down in the ground, they find a bolt or a piece of metal that should never existed in that time period. How the hell does that happen? There's a lot of big questions. First of all, tell listeners, what it is you do. I think you're like the real Robert Langdon, right? Because you're actually looking at these symbols and these icons, and you're putting it into historical perspective. How the hell did you get into this? Just curiosity?
No, it wasn't curiosity at all. Well, probably tell people that are, hearing me for the first time. I'm a geologist by education and by profession. I run a materials forensic laboratory that I founded in 1990. I worked for 5 years before that as a petrographer. And in my laboratory, basically what we do are autopsies on concrete and rock. So we only get involved when something goes wrong or there's a question about something. And that's primarily in the construction industry, like if, concrete has low strength or it cracks or whatever the case may be. And we get involved in some pretty wild things sometimes. One of the things we worked on was we examined all the fire damaged, jet fuel damaged, damage from the jet fuel fire at the Pentagon. And, that was an amazing project. And yes, it was a plane that hit the building. My God, I'm still getting calls about that. And I've talked a lot about that. But really, the way that I got into this was in July of 2000, when a controversial artifact was brought to me, and I was asked to perform a forensic study on the Kensington Rune Stone. And when it came to me, I didn't know what it was. I'd never heard of it. I found out it was found in my home state of Minnesota back in 1898 by a Swedish immigrant farmer who was clearing trees in preparation for farming. And he tipped over this 25 to 30-year-old aspen tree, and tightly wrapped in the roots was this 202-pound stone that had a long inscription carved in Scandinavian runes primarily. And so I did and like I said, I never heard of it. I didn't know what it was. It was an interesting project. And frankly, I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. But I came up with an idea of comparing the weathering of the inscription with the weathering of tombstones of known age. And after I completed that study, I concluded that the weathering of the inscription was older than 200 years. Because the minerals that I was studying began to come off at about 200 years, But on the Kensington Stone, they're all gone. So it's older than that. And that's from 1898 when it was pulled out of the ground, because it hasn't been in a weathering environment since. Well, in Minnesota, I know things are different where you live. That was where the country really started. But when you get to Minnesota, 200 years going back to 1898 puts you at the very end of the 1600s. There was nothing going on here. So obviously it couldn't be a late 19th century hoax as the world believes now. And I said that it was genuine. And I wrote my report and I sent it off, and I thought, well, that was fun. That was cool. They got one, good for them. And I thought that was it. Oh no. That's when the pushback came, and it was hard and it was nasty. And, at first I said, look, I'm not perfect. If I made a mistake, point it out, I'll fix it. Well, I didn't make a mistake. They just didn't like the results. And I'm talking about specifically academia, who had already gone on record saying that it was a hoax. And then I said, well, look, sometimes life doesn't go your way. If you can't point out where I made a problem, then I didn't make a mistake, and I stand by these results. Well, I was criticized and attacked, and of course they couldn't attack the evidence. So what do? They attacked the messenger. They attacked me. Well, I don't take that too lightly. And
we're chopping up there, Scott, a little bit. You're freezing and yeah.
And I don't.
Scott, you are frozen, and
but apparently, hear me?
I can hear you now. Yeah, you froze for a little bit.
All right. Okay, good. Anyway, so I decided that I was going to get to the bottom of this because, in my view or in my world, I trust rocks. I don't trust some people.
Yeah, you might say that's concrete evidence.
Yeah, exactly. And so I trust the rocks. And if the rock says that it was authentic, what that also means is that everything in that inscription must be consistent with the 14th century because it's dated 1362. And so what I did was I ended up going over to Sweden 5 times between 2003 and 2000. And I found everything that the scholars said didn't exist. So, of course, all that did was piss them off even more. And, from there, I set about to trying to answer the obvious questions. If this is a real artifact, then logic demands that somebody carved it. They came from some place, and they came here to the center of the North American continent for some reason. And I can tell you now, Joe, I can answer all of those questions without any hesitation at all. But the problem is it flies in the face of the historical narrative that you were talking about that we have been fed, which is basically a bunch of BS. Yeah. So thankfully, after 25 years, what's happening is this wall of resistance is starting to crumble. And as we all know, convenient truths, facts, evidence slowly rise to the surface despite being suppressed for a long time. And basically what I say to people is they say, well, what does the Kensington being authentic mean? Well, what that means is that it triggers a series of dominoes to fall. Yeah. And those dominoes go to some inconvenient places for certain powers that be, like the Roman Catholic Church. And one of those places, now let me ask you a question, Joe.
Yeah.
And if you don't know, don't feel bad. If you do, I'm curious to hear what you think. Have you ever heard of something called the Telpiat tomb?
No, can't say I have.
Okay, now that's incredible because the Telpiat tomb is one of the most important historical places ever. Okay, if you Google it, what you will find is that in 1980, in southern Jerusalem in the East Talpiot neighborhood. They were blasting the hillside in preparation for putting the foundations in for an apartment building. As they were doing that, they discovered a first century underground tomb. Now, in Jerusalem, this is not unusual. And these were actually tombs that were part of a specific tradition called the Essene, the Nazarites.
Yes,
you know who they are?
And this is starting to sound familiar because I remember a story reading about them finding the tomb in Israel for exactly that. I don't know if it's the exact one, but like you said, I think that's happened many times.
It is that tomb.
Yeah.
Yes. So anyway, in this tomb, they found 10 ossuaries, which are bone boxes, right? The Essene had a very unique burial practice. And so in these ossuaries, these bone boxes, they found 10 of them in the tomb, 7 inscribed with names, 6 in Aramaic, 1 in Greek. Names like Yeshua, which is Jesus's real name. Yeshua, son of Joseph. James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. Joseph, Matthew, Maria, Judah, son of Jesus. Those are the 6 that were carved in Aramaic. The 7th carved in Greek was Mariamne the Mara. The Mara is a title of honor, as in Lord, Master, or Queen. Now, there have been about somewhere between 3,000 to 4,000 ossuaries that have been found in Jerusalem over the centuries. To understand, the Essene edition was very specific. And of course, in about 70 AD, when the Romans crushed the Jews in Jerusalem, that burial practice ended. So when they find these tombs, they know they date to the 1st century, and that's it. So 6 of these 3,000 to 4,000 ossuaries that are in the Israeli Antiquities archives have the Mara title on them. 3 are male. This is the 3rd one that's female. Mariamne is a pet name for only Mary Magdalene, found in the Acts of Philip. So think about this. You've got the burial tomb of Jesus, James,
and Jesus'
Joseph,
son,
Maria, Matthew, Judah, and Mary Magdalene.
Holy cow, yeah.
Why doesn't the world know about that? It's been suppressed. Now, there's a lot more to this story. I don't know if you want to get into it, but it ties in with everything that's been going on with me out in the field.
Yeah.
And what it basically boils down to, Joe, is during the First Crusade, the Knights Templar, they were formed sometime around 1118. The first Grand Master was Hugh de Payens. Now, what a lot of people don't know is that the order really came together in about 1113, when 30 family members from southern Burgundian bloodline families sent 30 family members, including Bernard de Clairvaux and Hugh de Payens, his uncle, to basically join the Cistercians. 2 years later, Bernard founded the first daughter abbey at Clairvaux, hence the name Bernard of Clairvaux. By the time he died 40 years later, 38 years later, in 1153, there were over 300 Cistercian abbeys all across Europe, Scandinavia, the British Isles, into the Holy Land, okay? And the Templars are Cistercian. The Cistercians wore white tunics with black mantles. Do you see that right there? Do you see those colors?
Yep.
The Templars wore the same colors, except they had the red crosses, right?
Yeah.
Now, you're a brother Mason, right?
I am.
So those colors mean something to you, don't they?
They do.
The reason we have colors like this, maybe in something like Scottish Rite, is not. And I can tell you right now, brother, that there is no question that modern Freemasonry evolved from medieval Templarism. Medieval Templarism goes all the way back to the Essenic tradition into Egypt and beyond.
Yeah.
What happened in 1113 was not an accident. It was a coup. It was the beginning of the founding of this tradition. That tradition became immensely wealthy and powerful over the course of not even the next 2 centuries. And eventually they were suppressed in 1307, as you know full well. October 13th of 1307.
Let's tell listeners about that, because we get Friday the 13th from that.
Right.
And this is what happened that day, what the Pope was doing, what the King of France. So if you could run through that, because there are probably listeners who don't know what the hell we're talking about at this moment.
Well, I think I'm just going to hit them a little bit harder to begin with before we get to there. Let's go back to 1118 and what the Templars were really doing in Jerusalem at that time. Now, the narrative is they were the fighting force and they took back Jerusalem as the home for the Roman Catholic Church where Jesus came from. Well, that's BS, okay? The truth was the Templars were establishing a base of operations in the region so that they could go to Lebanon, Turkey, Egypt, and of course Jerusalem, to round off that they knew was there. We're talking treasure. We're talking about artifacts, talking about ancient knowledge, maps, documents, remains of important people. Birth records, all of it. The question is, how did they know about that? Because they are the ideological and biological descendants of that first century tradition and those people. Now, what a lot of people don't know about the Tel Piat tomb is when the archaeologists went in there and recovered those 10 ossuaries, most of the bones were missing. The reason is because the Templars went in there and recovered the remains of their ancestors. Now, think about this for a second. If you've got the mortal remains of somebody like, I don't know, Yeshua, Jesus, son of Joseph, wouldn't that be powerful leverage against an institution like the Roman Catholic Church?
Oh my goodness, it would rock them to their foundation. It'd be crazy.
Yeah. Well, now you know where the leverage came from and why the Templars became so immensely rich and powerful.
Yeah.
Now you know the underlying reason that nobody ever told you, that the church and the King of France combined together their power by legitimizing each other and elevating themselves above the people. And they knew that if they didn't move against the Templars, eventually they would move against them.
Yeah. Because first of all, people liked the Templars, right, Scott? In those days, like people liked the Templars.
Well, yeah, I mean, you'll get people that'll make arguments both ways, but of course, everybody has an agenda, right? But they were loaning money to people. They were
they created the bank, what we know as a banking system. They kind of invented. Yeah, they had so much money. And they said, "Hey, we can lend this."
Yeah, and if you were making a pilgrimage to the Holy Land, you could go to a Templar commandery. You could give them your gold, your money. They would issue a letter of credit with a code that you could then redeem once you got to Holy Land, so you wouldn't have to worry about getting robbed. And of course, they would tack on a little fee, once you got there. But the other thing that a lot of people
travelers checks that
exactly
in essence,
credit cards, right?
Exactly.
But the other thing that a lot of people don't understand is the free enterprise system was really invented by the Templars and the Cistercians, because at these monasteries that the Cistercians would found, and they would always found them in out of the way places along a stream, along a river. but they became immensely wealthy through animal husbandry and farming. And they also had foundries where they were making tools and weapons and all kinds of things. But they would go into the cities with their, their products, and they would sell them and make a lot of money. And so this is how the order became rich and powerful. And of course, the Templars had the finest sailing fleet at the time, and they were trafficking goods all over. And so there was a lot more to it. But this allowed, competition, and this brought prices down. So it did help the people.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously the king and the church did not like this, and they saw their power was being threatened. So before the Templars got too powerful, they were put down on Friday the 13th of 1307. And their headquarters in Paris, France at that time had a treasury. And on that morning, when the church agents went in they opened the doors, and it was empty.
Yeah. Color me
They also
surprised.
sent agents to the western port of La Rochelle, where there were 18 ships loaded with treasure. And when the agents got there, they were gone and disappeared into history.
Mm-hmm.
Now, this is where the research we've been doing over the last several years really takes off, because we know exactly what happened to at least 3 of those ships that came to Scotland loaded with treasures. And they basically hid out there for about 80 years until the Scottish earls, the most powerful earls in Scotland, who were obligated to protect the fugitive Templars and their descendants,
right,
because of their service at Bannockburn, which of course has been a long-standing myth or legend that the greatest victory in the history of Scotland at the Battle of Bannockburn, led by King Robert the Bruce. The battle was turned by these white knights that showed up and, helped the Scots defeat the British. Because of their service at Bannockburn, the Scottish earls were obligated to protect them, which they did for the next 80 years, and the treasures they had, until in 1395 and 1398, Earl Henry Sinclair took 8 ships. By the way, that number is not a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
Notice the 8 points on this flag right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And brought
There's
those
so much
treasures.
Symbolism in this whole world, right? Numbers and the number of pillars and it's crazy when you get into it. But go ahead.
None of this is coincidence, brother, as you know. Anyway, they brought those treasures over to North America, buried them in multiple places, mostly on islands on the southern coast of Nova Skyland.
Yeah,
But
Oak
as
Island,
you know,
right? There's a whole TV show
Oak
on
Island,
this,
yeah.
yeah.
But I'm sorry to tell people that are fans of the show, the Templars aren't stupid. They would not leave their treasures for a couple of brothers to find. They recovered those treasures in 1769 and 1770, and a lot of that money was used to help fund the revolution and establish a republic that we now call the United States of America. That's the short version of the story.
Mm-hmm.
So, and actually, when you remember
so
that
on our
great movie,
250th birthday, Scott, for our 250th birthday, thank a Mason.
100%.
Yeah,
but the
absolutely.
story of our anniversary is not 250 years old. It's actually 900 years old.
Yeah.
And this is the story that was kind of told in the movie now, but I have to say the story is better than that. So it's like National Treasure on steroids. And we know the details. It's just incredible. Well, anyway, that's the synopsis. And this is the real story. And, the only other thing I would say, Joe, is in our Constitution, we have things like separation of church and state. We have things that basically say that every single person on this planet, regardless of race, color, creed, sex, whatever, are all born with certain inalienable rights. That goes all the way back to the Grail romances that were written by Templar knights.
Yeah.
It's not a
Amazing.
coincidence. None of this is coincidence. And last I checked, didn't we fight a revolution? I think we did. In fact,
Absolutely.
I know we did.
We sure did. Yeah.
So when you
The original
look at
No
what
Kings
happened-
rally.
Well, I don't want another monarchy. I don't want somebody
No.
sitting at the top deciding, who lives and who dies and who gets money and who doesn't at the whim of a person who, frankly, I don't trust.
No,
But
exactly.
and I'm not necessarily talking about a specific individual. I'm just talking about
No, the institution.
a concept,
Yeah.
a concept.
Yeah.
And that's why our country was founded and has these tenets in its constitution. And make no mistake, brother, and anybody listening, okay? Our country was founded on the tenets of Freemasonry.
Yeah.
No mistake at all. This is 100% fact. And unfortunately, we have forgotten that.
Sure.
And to be perfectly honest, you and I, Joe, have not talked about this. There is no collusion here.
No.
But my job is to educate people on the truth about the history of not just this story, but anything else.
And on that note, we have to pause. We have a hard break, Scott. So, guys, we're going to take this quick break. We'll come back on the other side with Scott Wolter, and we'll hear more about our true history.
Don't put mercury in the trash. Don't put mercury in the trash. Fluorescent lamps. Fluorescent lamps. Thermometers. Thermometers. Thermostats. Thermostats. These could all contain mercury, so let's dispose of them properly. Don't put mercury in the trash. Don't put mercury in the trash. Know your products with mercury, so you can dispose of them properly. Mercury is harmful to human health and the environment. To learn what products in your home may contain mercury and where to safely dispose of them, please contact your local Board of Health or Department of Public Works or visit keepmercuryfromrising.org. Know your products with mercury, so you can dispose
Scott, do you see the chat box?
Visit
Do you see the chat box?
Because
No.
together,
Private
No.
chat. There. Okay, now I do.
brought to you by Win
Okay,
Waste
all right.
Innovation.
So we can communicate via that.
Tom on the line. Tom.
We're
It's
we're
on
we're
the lower
good. We're,
left. Yeah.
Star Music.
right. All right. So if you need to
Does
send me
somebody
something, you
want to
can
ask
when
a
we're live.
question?
No, those were from before you came on. Where do you want me to go when we come back out of the break?
Well,
What
I
direction?
guess I would like to hear your thoughts on this, and if you have any specific questions. There is
Sure.
one other point I would like to make, and I think
Boston, are you ready
you'll
for a show that's
appreciate
unique and different?
what I have
Blind
to
Me
say. I
on
hope
Radio
so.
Show
Okay.
is the
All
only
right.
commercial radio show in the world for the
Got
visually
it. We'll go
impaired
there. Hold
and
on.
the blind community. We are the bridge between the blind community and the sighted community. This show is sponsored by Carroll Center for the Blind in Newton, Mass. Fun, informative, educational, with trivia prizes every Sunday night. Blind and Beyond radio show every Sunday night, 7 to 9 p.m. on WCRN, 8:30 a.m.
More live and local radio than anywhere on the dial. WCRN.
All right, folks, welcome back to the second half of the third hour of the Sunday edition of the Joe Mangiacotti Show here on AM 830 WCRN Radio Central, from the center of the dial, the center of New England, and the center of information, AM 830 WCRN. Reminding you, lines are open and available. You can join the conversation with Scott and myself at 508-871-7000. That's 508-871-7000. Our text line is running at 617-297-8388, 617-297-8388. You can text that like you do anyone else. It appears on the screen here in the studio in real time. And don't forget, the station does stream 24/7 to the TuneIn app, as well as, you can tell Alexa to play WCN. She'll do that, no questions asked. Now, I do stream this to the station's Facebook page, YouTube channel, as well as my social media platforms at Joe Mangi Show, and that is X, Facebook, Twitch TV, LinkedIn profile, and yes, the TJM Show channel on Rumble. So multiple ways to watch, multiple ways to listen. Now, Scott in virtual studio here with me is, I think you're real life kind of Robert Langdon here, the geologist, petrographer, the author, president of the American Petrographic Services, like you said, when you got into all of this. And I know that you do so much with you've been following the evidence and the facts. Now, I have learned more from following you a little bit, but I learned as, becoming a Mason and getting the history there. We learned, of course, about 1307. The Pope sends this, communique to be opened at the same time to wipe out the Templar Knights. They were getting far too popular, powerful, and wealthy. I mean, creating the banking system, the method that you were describing, so merchants or people could do these pilgrimages, and they didn't have to carry gold or silver. They could carry that credit from one end to the other, and devised all this. And then when we get to American history, it's even deeper than I thought, because here in Boston, the Boston Tea Party was basically a Masonic meeting gone awry, right? It was actually the Templars met over the pub and they decided to go down. And then when you look at all of it, like you said, there's no coincidences, right? When you look at DC laid out, what do you see? You see a lot of Masonic and Knights Templar symbolism there on our dollar bills and all of that. So there's so much connection there. I forget the numbers. 38 out of 50. How many of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons?
Well, you know what?
Or something?
I have a Bible, a Masonic Bible, and there is a passage in there that says 53 of the 56 signers. Now,
yeah.
I don't know if we can document that, but I think that there probably were a lot of founders who kept their Masonic affiliations quiet. And we may not have those records. And of course, during the Revolution and later the Civil War, many of those Masonic records were destroyed. Yeah. So we simply don't know for sure. But I think a lot more of them were Masons than the official record says.
And in the Revolutionary War, too, you had that situation, Scott, did you not, that you had Masonic brother fighting against Masonic brother? So because you had British soldiers who were Masons, and of course American revolutionaries who were also Masons, which there were on occasion, it could have saved your life, right? Because there would have been a phrase that we would have said. And if you were about an inch away from the end of a bayonet and you said this Masonic phrase, and if that was a brother, at least your life
made a gesture,
you would be spared. Because a brother wouldn't take a brother's life, even country against country. So there was a lot of that. And Benedict Arnold, right? One of the most infamous. He didn't just betray the United States, he betrayed the Masons. And the Masons said, hey, you're going to go down in history as the world's biggest traitor. Because a lot of passwords and things were actually Masonic phrases that were used during the Revolutionary War. So it's just amazing that the history intertwined. Into your point, I guess it's argued that America started a long time earlier than 1776. Whoop, you froze for a second, Scott.
Yeah, I did, but all those points you make are true. It's part of our history. If you're not a Freemason, you're probably not going to hear about it. And you're going to wonder about it, but what you said is absolutely true. But there is one other point that I think is definitely important to make that relates back to the Templars and their suppression. Bernard de Clairvaux, he was the one that wrote the charter for the Knights Templar, and a papal bull was signed in 1129 on, not coincidentally, January 13th of 1129 at the Council of Troyes in Troyes, France. And basically what happened is, for the length of Bernard's life, he had a fascination with the Virgin Mary. And of course, the church was okay with this because the Virgin Mary was important, right? But really, all she was a metaphor for his veneration of the great goddess, the ancient goddess, the great mother, if you will. And in fact, during his lifetime, some of the popes became a little uncomfortable with his veneration of the Virgin Mary, to the point where they said, hey, we like her too, but you might want to dial it back a bit. But actually what was going on is the Templars were pretending to be Catholic. And eventually they realized that this is what was going on, that they were not the good Roman Christians. They were actually Gnostic Christians. And this was another reason why they were arrested, tortured, and eventually burned. Now,
can you tell the listeners about de Molay?
About Jacques de Molay? Oh,
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
So Jacques de Molay was the Grand Master of the Knights Templar in 1307 when the suppression happened. And actually, he was lured into Paris to attend a funeral, and he was arrested and imprisoned for 7 years, and he was tortured. And it's interesting story I heard, that when the day came in 1314, when he was to be roasted, not burned at the stake, he was roasted at the stake so it would be more painful. But they had tortured him so badly by burning his feet that he actually limped into his being tortured, or I should say roasted, carrying up his toe bones in them. I don't know if you've ever heard that story, but that's a story I've heard.
No, I didn't hear that.
So
one. I knew
obviously
what they did to him was brutal. Yeah.
Yeah, well, and so he's standing there and about to be roasted, and he made a proclamation, and he said within the next 12 months, both the king and the pope would be dead. And they were dead. They both died within 12 months of the death of de Molay. Now, I'm sure that's another coincidence, right?
Sure, of course.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well,
It's
let me
loaded
just
with
tell you
coincidences.
that there are no coincidences.
What was that thing about?
Just going back to Bernard.
Sure.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, well, who is the king that said, will somebody not do something about this meddlesome priest? And the priest was killed that night. In other words, sometimes those predictions manifest because of who said it. Look at when a mafia boss says, "Oh man, that person's a real pain in the ass," someone's going to score some points.
No,
right?
well, that's kind of let up.
Yeah, you froze there for a second. What was the last thing you said, Jack? Scott?
Oh, what I said was your point reminded me that, a mob boss saying, it'd be a shame if something happened to this person, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that comment manifests in reality for some strange reason. So yeah. So the Pope and the King,
and that.
Yeah, they weren't going to see their 13th month. That's for sure.
No, they weren't. They
up.
weren't.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
the number 13
Absolutely.
really is connected to the point that I'm trying to make here. The number 13 is what we call the number of the goddess, the great goddess. And it's tied to something called the Fibonacci sequence, the golden ratio, if you will. And that's where these numbers, sacred numbers that you and I were referring to earlier, are tied to this Fibonacci sequence. And 8 and 13 are two of those numbers. Now, they relate to, the whole idea of the Fibonacci sequence and the golden ratio being the keys to life in the universe. And who are the life givers, right? The feminine, the goddess, women, right? So that is why the number 13 was demonized by the church, right? The bad luck number. And it relates back to the Templars when they were suppressed on October 13th of 1307.
Friday the 13th.
Remember, I told you
guys, right? Friday the 13th.
Friday the
And that's
13th.
why in modern day, there are so many things coming from the Templar nuns and the Masons, like Friday the 13th, even a gavel that a judge uses, right? That goes back to lodge.
Yep.
There's so many things. Blackballing, right? Where does blackball?
Yep.
It comes from a Masonic vote of whether someone will become a Mason, right? One Mason could put a black ball.
Right.
So there's so many things in the lexicon of society that I don't think people realize are connected and traced back to Masons and or Knights Templar. It's quite interesting.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at things like the Washington Monument, which is a giant obelisk, right? But it's also a plinth. And what a lot of people don't know is that, and this was published in a book my wife wrote with Alan Butler called America, Nation of the Goddess. And I'm plugging it because it's a good book for people to read, to learn about these things that are hidden in plain sight, that relate back to Masonry, to the Templars, to the Egyptians, and actually back as far as the Atlanteans. But the Washington Monument is a giant plinth, and its shadow and hits different places in the National Mall on certain dates and times of the year. And these, again, are not coincidences. And the engineering that went behind it is absolutely brilliant. But this wasn't discovered until Janet and Alan discovered it, going back to like 2013, 2014. But anyway, the point is let's just get back to the goddess for a second.
Sure.
When those treasures of Scotia were first brought over, the Scots ran into some people when they got here, right? The indigenous people. Yeah. And unlike the Vikings, right, that came here between about the 8th century to the middle of the 11th century, when it was over from the Viking period, what a lot of people don't understand, that I know because I've been in the sweat lodge of the indigenous people, of the Algonquins, and they told me that when those white people came over here, the Vikings, they were basically assholes. They did not respect the tradition of the indigenous. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it. They're saying it.
Just remember,
And
this is
what
going out on
happened was-
FCC rules too. So, but go ahead.
Sorry about that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so what happened is the Algonquin tribes went down and met in council with the Iroquois nations, who were notorious fighters and warriors. And they said, look, you're going to have to deal with these white people sooner or later, so you might as well take care of the problem now. And they went up and wiped them out. Now, a lot of people say they just stopped coming. Well, there was no reason for them to stop coming. They were taken out. Right. Now, not long after that, literally within a couple decades, the Templars showed up, but they were different. And I'll tell you why they were different. First of all, they respected the traditions of the indigenous people. They embraced a similar reverence for the sacred feminine, for the goddess. And they bonded through ritual and intermarriage. Now, what a lot of people don't know, and I don't even know if you know this, Joe, but the Native Americans on this continent, and actually around the world, practice Freemasonry just like we do.
I did not know that. Okay. You froze again. Sorry, Scott. All right, folks, we're talking with Scott. Well, yeah, I was just going to fill people in because you're frozen.
Wait, what I said was I have studied it, and it's incredible, and the parallels are unmistakable. It's actually really interesting the way that they do it, and I think every Freemason should learn about it. But the point is, obviously the Templars are practicing Masonic ritual and passed it on to us, and so this is a way that they bonded. They had mutual respect, and so that allowed them to travel with their brothers all across North and South America. Because I've heard people make the argument about the Rune Stone. Well, how could they have gotten to the center of the continent? Well, I'll tell you what,
They were
the indigenous
escorted.
people know how to get around the continent,
Yeah,
right?
they were basically escorted there, right? I mean, they were taken there.
Exactly.
And here's the thing, when people start asking me about masonry and so forth, I said, it's a great equalizer in the sense that it doesn't matter where you are in the world. A lodge is a lodge is a lodge. A brother is a brother is a brother. And
Right.
it's once you identify each other and you know that. And I remember my father telling me this before I was raised in his lodge is, you can be dropped anywhere in the planet. And if you can find a brother, you're fine. You'll be taken care of. So to hear this history when it comes to the Native Americans here, indigenous people, bonding over that, it makes all the sense in the world because they weren't invaders. They weren't conquerors. They were brothers.
They were and you know what? That's exactly right. And it was interesting because I'm just going to plug my new book right here,
Sure.
The Greatest Templar Tale Never Told, which basically about 10 years ago, a woman came to me and said, I have the personal journals of Earl Henry Sinclair. And I said, yeah, sure you do. Well, it turns out she did. And what this book is about is she presented 20 books that chronicle 15 generations of two Scottish clans that came over to North America to check on those treasures. And we're talking about 5 generations of the Sinclairs and 10 generations of the Weems. If you look up the Weems in Scotland, they were shipping barons back then, and they are to this very day. And in these journals, we learn about the treasures coming over here, about the island, as I told earlier, 120 remaining descendants of those Knights Templar that fled France and treasures, who stayed in North America, who intermarried with the indigenous people. And what happened was when those treasures were buried there, the indigenous people said, look, gold and silver means nothing to us. But this is obviously important. Our brothers, we guard these treasures for you. And they did that for over 400 years until 46 Freemasons, young Freemasons, and 6 slaves were sent up by George Mason and Benjamin Franklin to recover those treasures. And as I said, the bulk of that money was used to help fund the revolution. But when those 46 men arrived in Nova Scotia, there were natives waiting for them who were the descendants of those natives that met with Earl Henry and all the generations that came over to check on the treasures. The tradition was you were to visit the Western lands to check on the treasures twice in your lifetime, once with your father, once with your son. And of the 15 generations, only 2 were not able to go. But the natives guarded those treasures. And when they met with those 46 men, they called themselves the Brothers of Light. And they took them to the spots. Here. They recovered those treasures and brought them back. It's the most incredible story I've ever read. And it took me 9 years of vetting to finally be ready to present this story as true.
Goodness.
And I'm telling you, Joe, it's absolutely incredible. And as a Mason, I learned something. I learned a new word. Have you ever heard?
No.
I never heard of it either. I learned about it in the journals. It means to give a slave their freedom. So, and those 6 slaves, when they came back, all were freed. Now, we have our 250th anniversary coming up, right?
Yeah.
And as Freemasons, we deserve to pat ourselves a little bit on the back. I'm talking about our Masonic brothers in the past. But while we're doing that, we cannot forget the contributions that were made by the indigenous people and those 6 slaves. So what I would like to see is a coming together of all these people that did this work in the past to help found this amazing country we now call the United States of America. But a republic is a fragile thing.
Yep.
And we need to stand up. We need to understand where we came from, what that history is, so we can go forward into the future in the right way. And it's important to know where we came from. It's a great story that everybody knows already, but the truth is
it's even better
and goes
10 times.
much
Yeah,
farther
it's
back.
just so fascinating. Before we run out of time, Scott, I want to ask you about pirates and Templar Knights and your theory there, because I floated something similar, and fill our listeners in on what you think the relationship is, because you got to go back to 1307, of course, the suppression, as you call it, the suppression, which was, the Pope ordering all Masons to be to be murdered, in essence, to be on Friday the 13th, open up this communique, go after them. Like you said, they knew what was coming. Ships were gone, treasures were moved, all of that. But the high seas and the Templars and pirates, what's your connection there?
Okay, well, let me tell it this way. Do you remember we were talking about the Telpia tomb and those bone boxes?
Absolutely.
Okay, so you understand that these underground chambers were made up of two rooms that were carved into the rock. One was called the antechamber, which would be open to the south, and that's where they would perform rituals. So when a family member died, they would process the body of the deceased, they would anoint it with perfumes and oils, and then wrap it in a shroud and bring it into the other room that was deep underground called the burial chamber. And they would place this body wrapped in a shroud on a bench carved into the rock and leave it there for 1 to 2 years. Then they would come back and collect the bones and put them in these bone boxes, which were only big enough so that the two body, your femurs, would fit in crossed, the skull would go in last, and now you know the origin of the skull and crossbones. So this tradition goes back to Jesus and Mary Magdalene, comes through to the Cistercians and the Templars, and into Freemasonry. Now, in between, remember, the Templars had the finest sailing fleet in the world. They had knowledge of how to navigate with the stars. They knew how to calculate the circumference of the earth. And when you know how big the earth is, you know how long it takes to get certain places and how to prepare for that. They ruled the high seas both before and after the suppression. And what did they fly on there besides the Templar cross? The Jolly Roger, the skull and crossbones. Do you see the connections?
Yeah. And there was a certain, it's told in history anyway, that there seemed to always be a certain respect in a port, among the pirates that flew the Jolly Roger and, of course, the Templar ships. And, of course, a pirate ship wouldn't even think twice about attacking a Templar ship. That would have been suicide.
Well, no, the pirates were Templars.
That's that's the whole theory, right?
Yeah.
Is that they in piracy kind of was the 1600s, maybe height of piracy?
Well, yes. Well, 1600s. I mean, you look at I did a show called Pirate Treasure of the Knights Templar, and the Templars or the pirates a lot of times would sail around the southern coast of Africa. And then as you come up on the eastern side, you hit Madagascar. And that was a place that was kind of beyond the reach of the British Navy and the French Navy. And, they could hang where they would scuttle their ships when they became, worm-ridden and, they wouldn't work anymore. But they were also going over to India and the Far East and trading over there and getting products and bringing things from Europe and Africa and America. So it's an interesting story, but it's a continuous thread. The tradition has been involved, and it went from Templars to pirates to Freemasonry It's all connected.
It's all connected. Scott, before we run out of time, let's run through, first of all, the latest book you have. Let's plug that. I want to make sure everybody knows the name of it, where they can find it, and your wife, who is also an author with incredible research. So let's roll through that information so that people, if they want to go, they can go check this stuff out.
Wonderful. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, well, my new book is called The Greatest Templar Tale Never Told, the Sinclair Weems Journals. And if you want to get a signed copy, you can go to our website, which is scottfwolter.com, one word. And then my wife's book that she wrote with a British author named Alan Butler, who we're going to go visit here in August over in England. He's just a wonderful guy. He's written many books. He's the one that got me started in understanding about Bernard, the Cistercians, and their connections to Freemasonry and Templarism. But their book is called America, Nation of the Goddess. And if you order it on our website, she'll sign the book too. But if you don't want a signed copy, just go to Amazon. And I will tell you that this new book that I wrote came out on March 1st. We've sold over 10,000 copies. Nice. The reviews have been amazing. I'm telling you, and it's not me. It's Jan, come here and say hi real quick. Just say hi.
Just come on over, Janet.
He doesn't want to. Jan, come over.
Yeah. Of course, you just became grandfather.
She's not.
Right? You just had a new
go.
grandchild.
Come on, just say hello real quick. It doesn't matter. You look beautiful. She hasn't dolled herself.
Oh my goodness!
Jan.
Neither have I. That's why I wear a fedora.
Oh, your hair is wet. Just come and say
but
hi.
We're against the hi.
Nice
beautiful. To meet you.
Who cares?
We just plugged your book, but we're against the clock, guys. I got to take a hard break. The show's over at noon. Scott, thank you so much. Okay. Very nice to meet you. And please, you're going to come back, right? You'll come back again.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And here's our granddaughter.
There you go.
He's been keeping us
Deadline
busy. That's
news,
why I work
weather,
so hard
and local information.
Right. Well, they're actually
WCRN.
Let me. I can turn the station down so that audio is going out. So we're still streaming. So anybody who's on my website, on my social media, is actually still seeing this. So I'll let it run.
Oh, okay. Very good. Very good. Well, listen, I had to put her on the spot there. I haven't had a shower either. I got to shave and do all that, but I don't
Sunday
care.
morning, I
got
to tell you that I was getting ready to go to sleep last night, and my fiance is up this weekend, and I said, "Geez," I said, "I got to rethink this Sunday morning show." I said, I used to be able to sleep in and everything, but it is different. Yeah, but it's still fun. But yeah, I am getting ready to, and people can still watch this, launch a long version podcast. This is governed by FCC rules. We're governed by the breaks. We're governed, and you get a break. You know what I'm saying? In the middle of a good thought, and you get a break.
I understand.
Yeah.
I've done this
but
before.
I'm going to launch something called Case Files. I'm leading into my PI background a little bit, and I own the second generation private detective agency started by my dad. So,
you know what, Joe? We actually have some historical figures. Hey, Jan, he's a private investigator.
Yeah, second generation.
And
I started doing PI work in high school when I got my driver's license. Yeah, back in the early 80s. I worked for a guy named Shulman out of Sherburne, Mass. And this was long before the internet, right? Al Gore hadn't invented it yet. So my after-school job is they would get what they called warrants, where basically, and you know this, we're of the age, you could use a credit card for months if the clerk didn't check the book, right? So it was one of these things where I would get, this little piece of paper, and it'd say, go get the credit card from this guy. It's no good. And so I'm 17 driving around, knocking on doors, saying, hey, you got to give me your credit card. And they would, if they gave it to me, I had to cut it in front of them, Scott, sign an affidavit, and I got like $15 to get a credit card. And if they said, oh, I lost it or I destroyed it, I'm not using it anymore, if I got them to sign the affidavit, I got $13. And that was my, so in high school, that was my after school job. So by the time I was 18,
really? Okay.
I was doing surveillance I'm doing domestic cases and stuff at 18 years old. And my
right.
father started the agency in 1986, and it's continued under my license since he passed away. And so I have a
Wow.
very long history in the private investigation industry, and my career has been parallel of, PI work in broadcasting, and in my early days,
right.
after you get through the initial, because to break into broadcasting, you do whatever the hell you can. I mean, you work Christmas and Thanksgiving Day and New Year's Eve, and you work overnight. But once I got into news talk radio, I was an investigative reporter for a good portion of that, and then worked up to like a news director at stations. So there was kind of some parallel in the career, both investigations and dig in there that worked, and made the leap over to talk radio about 20 something years ago. But yeah, that's kind of
your history there. That's great. Reason it resonates with me is because, in this research, we've had some names come up that we have not been able to find. And based on the documents that we have, they have to exist, but we just have not been able to find them. So maybe you can help us with some of these names.
Yeah.
And we'll give you the context. Jan, what was the date on that one with Derby? Was that 1750?
I'm gonna drop the streaming. We can still talk, but to people now, they don't need to see this. So thanks everybody for watching and listening. And nobody's left off the streaming, by the way, Scott. So the radio show ended on the air, but everybody watching stayed on to see what we're going to talk about. But I'm gonna end it on the streaming, and you and I can still talk. So thanks everybody for